Are you not coming here?
So, well, we're talking about AFIO. This was a Google Summer Code project that Chief Government signed back on, I think, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And Samuel has continued to work on code since then. And we do, I suppose, as both depending on the suspension for what we want to do with our work, and we talked a little bit about how we could work together, and that we need to use how idea, and how we jump on it, and we're looking at a proposal, and we selected it as a possible foundation for software. That'll be here.
All right, yeah, the way to such so I decided to send called caffeine for that. Yes, sure. For the next few months, I'm going to be working on the RDFIO extension. The main part of my proposal was to adapt it to work with templates used in Semantic Media Wiki. So as Joel mentioned, I'm taking part in this as part of the Free Open Source Software Outreach Program for Women. As a whole, then open source software has, as far as coding goes, is about 2% participation by women, which is a lot lower than IT as IT sector as a whole. There are various reasons for this. In terms of obstacles that people might have to participation. And so the scheme aims to help people with experienced mentors. Not everyone taking part in the scheme is doing coding, so there is a diversity of skills involved in that. So some of the people are working on documentation, outreach, so there are people working on Wikidata outreach, and other to do with mapping APIs and URL citations. So this runs alongside the Google Summer program, and you can actually apply to both. And it's designed to be a remote working program. So it could be that you're in my case in the middle of different continents yourself. And so a lot of this is focused on communication and sort of learn to keep up with reporting and communicate on and reach out to people with inspiration with ideas. So myself, my background, I live in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I have been working as a program about professionally largely for about 18 months. Previously, I worked in the public sector, dealing with a large database of education opportunities. Also worked in the startup environment similar, and I've also done contract work for the National Health Service. This has been semantic data subjects. It's been very much SQL. And so I've developed an interest in semantic data over recent time. And so when I saw this project, I was very much excited to take the opportunity to work on this. So the rest of the team has been with two members of the project. So there's Joel here, whose background is in botany. And Samuel, the mentor is the mentor, so Samuel originally developed the extension 4 years ago of Google Summer Code. And so he's now he's in Sweden, and his background is bioinformatics and oncology, I think. I'm going to join Samuel about also some of the use cases that we're using to conduct the extension to work with people's needs. I'll also be soliciting use cases from people outside of that. So if anyone is interested in using the RDFIO extension, then sort of get in touch and let us know what you want to do from it. So why is RDFIO needed in the first place? So Wiki does have some native RDFIO capabilities. So you can export RDF from SMWCon, and it's fairly straightforward. You can figure it, you can create the starter endpoint. However, the issue is more with the importing. So it's the IO rather than the other that's the big thing with RDFIO. So there's not a great to import RDF. You can use statistics and data and do all sorts of mapping, but it's not that intuitive and easy to use. You can create your schematic video, but it's not necessarily very well linked into the rest of the science web. So you can work up your big or your entities of competition. It's very much self-contained. So one of the things that I'm looking at in this project is how would it argumentatively interoperable with the systematic technique that would want to sync with other sources. Yes, or would you import on a usual basis? How would you want it to interact with other sources? So at the moment, the extension it can import arbitrary data, so it doesn't necessarily match up with if you're using templates within SMWCon. Then it's not you could put in any sort of arbitrary script a property that's this particular type of SD wouldn't usually have, and it will add a page and set the properties directly, so it doesn't work with the template, so it can just things the big structure. So what we're looking at is should it be used in existing templates? Should it create on the basis of the idea of data reporting, or is it modifying existing templates? So if you ask a new arbitrary different, then would change template for everything? Here's a diagram of how things work at the moment. So initially, when it's developed, then you use Transmedia with the writer and the extension of those Samuel refactored to use Wiki object model instead. However, we're actually looking at possibly removing the dependency. I think it's largely used for parsing, so that's something that we could actually run natively into the extension. So probably assessing the work to get that and that's something that can be accomplished within the time scale. And there's a refactoring that we could do to make the code more efficient and understandable. There is also a need for improved documentation to make it as clear as possible how to use it, and particularly for people who are not familiar with RDF. You do get people installing it and then having questions. So something that there's work that can be done on that. Another thing we're looking at is a pretty triple per page. So if you select a particular entity and you want in your functionality source and you want to say, well, what's your all the relations that are going to be towards this entity. And yes, a major part of the work is to looking at getting to work with templates that are used within semantic media working now. Also, for the page metadata, looking at the Ubuntu extension, which can be used with the scripting language Lua to do dynamic manipulation of data. So at this point, I mean, week one of the internships, I've been very much came here to learn as much as I could and talk to people regarding some very keen on getting people's feedback suggestions as to what would be the best way to accomplish this. And we have also been over the next couple of weeks developing use cases of figuring out what's the simplest thing that you want to do with RDFIO, how complex can things get, and we want to be able to handle that. We've coming up with developing use cases and how we test those, using the documents that we're involved in, also having a look at other pages where you might want to use this personality ability. I think talking to someone who's wanting to use it for socials and use things that see. So in that case, it might be useful for the clients for that. And particularly, not as with the shorthand say, not everyone who uses this ability is very familiar with the RDF format to back and start to query that. And so, with the ability that people can use that without necessarily really understanding substantive data, then what would be something that people can say, there's a really useful information for us, I'm going to post that, I'm going to set up the information I need and put it into my media working, and to populate a lot of the information and enhance that information. Very much want to know that the development is in line with things that other people are doing within with this media working into media as a whole. So since Wiki data, Wiki data is using data from our models to be as much in line with that as possible. And one of the things building departments that we if you find it hard back in the wiki and you want to know well where that come from, and being able to point to actually that came from particular object source on whatever date. So looking at the stuff that we'll be able to put imported and as previously mentioned, what's the best way to deal with templates? So a lot of important tools for templates, and those also used in data tools basically in the other parts of media wiki, and so looking to harmonise as much as possible what other people are doing. You can find that there's a project page, you have to link that from the book page from the conference. So if anyone has any questions, which are or have any comments to that, you can just go to the book page for the project. Since I'm in the room, then if anyone has any sort of questions, comments. So how do you mean functional application?
Like, you see how like application in mind for itself,
I have some sources of data, some sources of virus data, um,
yes, the stuff that already. How about having the additional data in a RDF store next to the card page, written on the MQTT page? So the rough idea was that we already have an RDF store finding, which can be used for query answering. It would be possible to set up this RDF store like a place of it and to store RDF data, which is not coming from Wiki. Now, it's the obvious problem is of course you enter the wiki and you use URIs which are used in the wiki that is not in the wiki, then editing the wiki might need this additional RDF. But of course RDF stores have a facility of automatic link graphs. So it is not difficult to separate the external code from the internal code and to query them together. So you would have one large soup of triples, but some of them will come from the wiki and will be synchronized with the wiki edited, and the other will just remain under your external control and be directly written there. And it's a good thing then would be if you can do this in such a way that all the queries inside the wiki take over data sets to come. Which is the main part of the work. We currently only have RDF store findings where we can answer the query based on the external RDF store in the sense that we can find the pages that match the query, but we do not fetch any other data from the RDF store. So everything that we see printed out, all the data is still come from the SQL file. So if one would change that or extend the RDF store finding, all the data that you could possibly be interested in can have is fetched from the RDF store, not from the SQL file. It would only give you some interesting information. So, okay, what's my question? My question is, in the use cases you had in mind, is that actually helpful, or would that not work? Is it not really the right thing for
Am I wrong that there is an extension that, or maybe it's a configuration in the RDF, in the RDF as the native store, whether or not to have triples in the store that aren't in the wiki. There was part of the problem we had is that there's a sort of as I think what you data extensions. You know, the sort of the role to present is kind of littered with extensions of various levels of compensation and
but I don't think anything like that is currently functional. There might have been such a gap. In the SMWCon layout, we have no way to hack external data. That would be another interesting extension, of course. One could also say, okay, let's just write it directly to SQL and somehow keep it separate. But much of the hassle I see here with the FIO, or much of the difficulties that you have to face are in how to prevent arbitrary artifacts in the wiki and how to update that in the wiki, because we don't have to run the one of them actually is a requirement or just a necessary workaround, because you don't see another technical approach for me.
So I think for me, I like what you described and would suit us very well, because we have our treatment data, and then we have data from our partner organizations that have the courses, for example, that don't necessarily reflect on Wiki page, it's sort of not ours. So that would be that describes very well our actual use case. Samuel, I know, is interested in using SMW as sort of a collaborative editing environment for RDF. So that it's I think his initial idea was that you export, maybe have RDF store, put it in SMW, edit it collaboratively, and then put it back in your RDF store.
That's the use case. I see. Yeah. These are two very different things.
But I think you're certainly right that we realize that we're not going to always be able to do that. So actually, I guess I have two comments. One is that I'd like to draw a picture to make sure I understand what I was saying. And the other is we're going to have to prioritize because this is sort of highlighting the fact that there are very different approaches in this case.
One more thing that comes to my mind here, the reason I'm contesting it is mainly it seems to me to be the easier and more direct path, because the architecture, the general path to go with this improved RDFs for binding and then use the RDFs for as it's meant to be used for the NSS. One more thing I could do is that actually with several keys using the same binding to the same RDFs for each to the unnamed draft, and then have complete access to the other wikis data through the ask query and context. So that some exciting things to be done there. I think I have a clear idea of what needs to be done to achieve that. So I think it's the task of this can be contained. It's not arbitrary large or complex. It's quite clear what is required to do that. So I think that would be a feasible project for the developers. It's not something that would be created with the RDF, because there you need all this systematic. I can't even reimagine that you would naturally edit RDF with the process. Your eyes are very long, and right there in a wiki, this is already this kind of stuff. So,
well, except that we would make use of the existing vocabulary importer. So we would have this kind of these problems like low calibration. So we would drawing back to your file.
but the arbitrary object was the arbitrary but obviously just use circuit and arbitrary and how people in general, all RDF was meant to capture the RDF to content the wiki is the best possible practical way and to provide a space so we might explain the integrated type of different and in your role at a place to go on largely that is going to interfere at some point. So because our RDF was not really meant to represent a specific set of RDF, more like a one or function with much change. So when you set the whole part and only the complex project, like we want to have actually pipeline or the mindset system going to the work.
I have a couple of compliments. One, I got a couple of design, but a few years ago, myself and a few researchers in Maryland were looking for we make some but seem to address a lot of issues, a lot of data, a lot of things. I think this is kind of partially overlapping in Rule 2. And it doesn't use later, we're watching closer to also, the project cost of the program runs in a very similar manner that people can control. One difference is that people most people and overall volume that is being by the organization to adopt this product. So we can use foundation kind of housing the vehicle for support idea that the product everything's transparent. That's something, we talked about moving towards public transparency. And part of what Karen and both the boss and these are programs trying to do is stress participation in the research development. So the two sort of measure success of a project is whether the student or the intern remain to the actual project. So everything is very transparent and communications from the internal proposals and review proposals and the public comments. There's a lot of specificity in the process of the science and Microsoft and then content that with it's sort of the products and everything that is involved. Half-baked ideas, sometimes that we put a proposal on paper and going through the process. Part of that happens with that always becomes okay. Things get good over time, being able to get ideas that are so cool to see that more students one time I will open anyone Ken? I'm sorry, however, it is not good.
When you make interacting with people online. Yeah.
So the next program part is not just a Q&A session, but I actually do have. That's a good idea. I can use anything where I have web access, so that I can also use this machine here. Yeah, so this format is a Q&A session, which means we can start with Q, but I can also start with the contents and tell you some more things about how the data has some slides for that. But with hiding someone, it was just about all the apps, so making some context to my slides are on the wiki, like everyone slides to be, I hope. So please make sure to not forget link to your slides on the wiki for upload and there to get the slides. So we have complete coverage of this. Is RDF export that we find for Wikidata for maybe purposes without David has some.
Yeah, that's probably one of the questions. Tuning for better days, try that a little bit to
Okay, so I should talk to
well,
okay, so it's good we have this screen and close this. Okay, I'll try to be static. This is a very hard shot for me. Maybe like this, so I don't have to show my own slides. Okay, I'm still not going to come over with that to you because I have to be here. So purpose why I'm showing you this for one thing, maybe you're actually interested in RDF exports of Wikidata, which might well be the case. Other thing, maybe you want to see another practical example of how people use RDF to encode information which is like in semantic media wiki. And maybe also third, it shows some of the things we would encounter if we wanted to express all of the data in Wikidata in SMW, because the RDF data model is very close in a sense to what we can do directly in SMW with some restrictions, but the Wikidata data model has some complications that are not so. Okay, so you remember all this that I showed you yesterday. This is the data we have in Wikidata, and especially we have these complicated statements which are not just property and value, but property value qualifiers, reference lists with a lot of property value pairs, and even extra information like this rank here. Now, you have learned 2 days ago, or you already knew before that RDF is a triple-based format, really like almost like SMW, as I said, very close in this sense, where you can say subject, property, object. And of course, this works very well to say, okay, Douglas Adams, spouse, Jane Belson, this is subject, property, object, but then where do you put all this stuff here? And there's some things are needed here to encode that. And it would be the same as if you wanted to encode this information as a W. Again, you don't really have a place to put such extra stuff about one particular piece of information. If this was that. Now, in order to create RDF, what are the actual things we have to consider other than this type of encoding? So one thing you have to consider when you want to create RDF, and this can already be a bit of a pain for some people, everything should have a URI. So instead of your internal IDs, you should use some kind of uniform resource identifier, which is as useful as possible. And what does that mean? I mean, in the first instance, we use these URIs just as a nice identifier scheme that gives you a good way to mint your own identifiers in a way that doesn't conflict with anybody else's identifiers on the web without talking to everybody else first. And this is done by usually using some HTTP-like even protocol and using your own domain name. So if you have control over wikidata.org, it's a good idea to create URIs under wikidata.org, because it's very unlikely that other people will do the same with their data because they don't own the data set. And in any case, if they did, it's somehow you are the authority on that. So it's a good way to make identities. You already have your own private namespace, so to speak, if you have some kind of domain. But then the other thing is, even though these look like URLs of normal web pages, we don't normally want them to be normal web pages, because you can state all kinds of things about web pages, like when were they created, what was the creator application, all kinds of metadata, the title of the web page. But when we export data in Wikidata, of course, we don't want to describe web pages. When we say something about Douglas Adams, it's not about the page on Douglas Adams, or if I take some book, maybe The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I would say the author of the book is Douglas Adams, yes, but the author of the web page is a completely different person. So I have to somehow keep these separate, and I can't just use the URL of my wiki page as an URI. On the other hand, we also want that if somebody puts this URI in a browser, it would be nice if there would be some data coming back. going into the 4-4. Also, if nothing else works, that's maybe still a feasible solution. Okay, so what we do here for Wikidata is we create another namespace. So this isn't wiki, as you can see. It's called entity. It's a subdirectory of the URL, and then we use the ID like 242 or whatever ID we have. And this is set up on the server side, so it implements content negotiation. So if you make a request to that address here, it will check what in your HTTP request header you ask for as a result. And for example, if you are in the browser will say, I want to have HTML normally, or something like that. And if that is the case, it will redirect you to a page where you can get HTML from. That is a non-wiki page. On the other hand, if you fuse this with an RDF tool, it will redirect you to an RDF export. But in each case, the redirect will be obvious to the application, so there will be no confusion about the fact that this is maybe the real content of that page. It's always clear that it's a redirect and you are just getting content on that URL. Okay, so that's a bit of a extra information. And I have to say this is a bit of an obstacle for people who want to start exporting RDF, that they have to think about what the actual IDs should be like. It's not so hard once you have it, but it's a bit of a okay. The other thing we need to do is we have to somehow map out all these 350 languages to official language tags, which are not really the same in all cases. We have some weird outliers there in India, where the language code isn't exactly what the ISO or ICANN, I think it is IANA or something, registry says for this type of language code, so we have to somehow make sure this matches. And also we have to think a bit about how we can reuse existing vocabulary. So for example, the labels of the Wikidata pages we actually export with RDF as labels. The descriptions we use schema.org vocabulary descriptions. For the aliases there's in stores an alt label which seems to fit. So we try to make use of these things when we can. Hopefully to someone's benefit who actually has an idea what this means but wouldn't know what we mean with some arbitrary use property we could also. These are again these typical abbreviations here. Of course, each of these things has a long URI which really identifies the content. We also use the provenance vocabulary that Yolanda was talking about 2 days ago briefly to clarify to relate to them. So the main thing I wanted to show you is what we do with the statements. So this problem again is we somehow have this main triple, but then we have extra information. So what do we do? Where should this extra information go? And the solution one commonly adopts in RDF to do that is called reification, meaning to make something a thing again. So in this case, the triple itself should become a thing in our graph, should be something that we can use to attach further things to. This is how the whole statement looks. It's the whole statement that I just showed you with identifiers, so maybe not immediately readable. But I can show you what I mean with reification. So this is Douglas Adams, again with some abbreviation here. P42 is the ID. This is P26 is the spouse property, and the spouse is James Elton, which is actually this Q ID here. And as you can see here, we don't have a direct triple which connects Adams to Dawson with a property based on P26, but rather we have something huge here in the middle. Huge because we create some hash value, or it's not a hash value, it's actually a statement ID. So what we did here is we exported the statement as a thing of itself. So instead of just having the statement in the structure like a triple subject property object, the statement now exists in the RDF graph. It is a known object. This is the statement. And what we do here is we say, okay, the main value of the statement is this. Then there are qualifiers. 2 of them actually. This is the start date and end date qualifiers, each with values again. This thing is of type statement, so we clarify this as well if somebody is interested. And it has references. So this was the provenance vocabulary that I mentioned. So it uses this was derived from, and this represents the reference that we have. It's just one in this case. So again, what is reification? Reification is this idea of making the statement itself a thing in our graph. And you can see that this introduces some indirection, because if you want to find out who was the husband of Jane Belson, for example, you need to do a join across the statement table. You have to find all the statements which have spouse Jane Belson, and then you have to find all the things which have a relationship to this statement. we use two variants here of this spouse property. So both of these URIs are based on the spouse ID, but one is with S and one is with V to make the distinction. So this is an accurate representation of this information somehow, but it's not super convenient, as you can see. It's maybe not the thing you would prefer if you saw that in an efficient way. Also, we have extra stuff down here, which I didn't discuss much. For example, a time value like we have for start date and end date is not just a single value as you maybe see it on a wiki page. In this case, this was the date. But it has additional information attached to it, which we again have to represent somehow. For example, it has a preferred calendar. This is the Gregorian calendar model, which we have to somehow attach to the value, and it has a precision which tells us that this is precise up to the date, which is again a value we have to capture somewhere. And so we have another level here, and I have to do that again. So you see if we get a good number of triples for just a single statement. And of course, this has some downsides in practice if you want to work with this, because, as I said, you need a lot of joins to reconstruct the data, even a single statement. Okay, but on the other hand, it hopefully serves to show or to give you an example of how we can represent such data in a canonical fashion in pure triples. And if you would do the same in SMW, it would look very similar. You could also have a property. You could say this is a new page, a helper page. And from that page, you link all these properties, and Douglas Adams has just a link to this page. So that would be the equivalent. And of course, in SMW, you can also use sub-objects instead of creating whole new pages, and therefore you wouldn't need to require to create a wiki page for that. But it would still internally in the SQL, it would still have the same structure, and it would require the same extra amount of joins. That is also something to consider. Okay. Of course, in a sense, every representation in a fixed schema database would somehow require this type of indirection to some extent. We could get rid of some things, but since we don't know how many qualifiers there are and how complex they are, we couldn't get rid of all of these things. So even in a pure relational model, you would have some of this kind of indirection. Okay. So this was basically just like a glimpse on how RDF export works, and it maybe connects a bit to what I said earlier, that the RDF export is just our best effort way of representing this in this different format. It's not this is not exactly what Wikidata contains. It's just our way of exporting it to RDF, and it could change in the future. We don't view Wikidata as being exactly this RDF, and in fact, some information in Wikidata can't be represented very nicely in RDF. For example, the qualifiers are ordered on the page. It's not relevant for query answering, but here you don't have an order. All these things, I mean, some things are left to other things, but that doesn't mean anything. They could also be swapped, and it would still be the same information. So order is really not represented. Okay, now as you can see, this is quite complex, and the question, of course, is can we make that simpler? And indeed we can. What makes this complex, why we need this reification of statements, is qualifiers need to be represented somehow, reference need to be represented, and complex values like this complex time value need to be represented as well. So in order to simplify all this, we can also export statements, restrict our export to statements which simply don't have qualifiers. As you have seen yesterday, most of them are in this category. So this already gives us a simpler triple view of the main claim of the statement. Then we might as well drop the references and say, okay, this information can't be represented here, but it doesn't really change the claims if we remove the references. And we can also simplify the value encoding, for example, by omitting the calendar model or omitting the precision and just really storing the main time point of a particular value. So this allows us to give a simpler RDF format, and it's like an alternative RDF format. And again, as I said, there is no one RDF encoding. You can do it in different ways. And one particular thing that we have done, and I think this is of some independent interest, not just for RDF, but also for many other applications, is to export the classification that you have in Wikidata. So in Wikidata, we have two properties which are not special in any way. They have just been created by the community. but they have an important meaning, and these properties are subclass of and instance of. And we have seen that again 2 days ago, that this is also present in RDF and RDF schema in the form of type and subclass of. And the interesting thing is that people really use them like in RDF and RDF schema. They are aware of how to model have hierarchies in that data. They don't just do this in the same way as categories are modeled in Wikipedia, but they try to really construct a meaningful hierarchy of concepts. And I think this could really have quite a few applications for other users. Because it's a really interesting hierarchy, and it makes sense in many places. I was really surprised, I have to say, that much of it is quite well modeled already, even though there are still many places to it. And often these things are used without qualifiers, but not always. And in particular, exceptions can be found in instance of. So, for example, something can be a country starting from a certain date. Not all instance of relationships are perpetual and given things of the universe, but they can also sometimes change. And this is some reason why people sometimes use qualifiers. So again, we can't represent that in RDF, and we have to somehow ignore these statements, because there's no way to say that a type statement only holds health for a certain time interval. But even if we ignore all this, we get a lot of interesting information. So this is some export we did. There are 6 million instance of relations without qualifiers. This is really quite significant if you think that the overall number of items we have is 15 million. So almost, not quite half of them, but many. I mean, you have to think that all Wikipedia pages have an item, including even category and template pages and redirection of disambiguation pages, ambiguation pages. So instance of is quite widely applied here. And it's by far the most used property in Wikidata. So it seems that this is really an important thing for the community. And subclass of is also quite widely used, 40,000 times. And this really surprised me, because this can't be imported easily from anywhere. So the category hierarchy in Wikipedia doesn't make much sense as a class hierarchy. And in any case, there are many Wikipedias with all different category hierarchies. And these 40,000 really seem to be created by people, mostly manually or in very small batches, but not imported in a large scale. So that I found quite impressive, and also very interesting from the viewpoint of how do people collaboratively create and design a taxonomy of the world, right? So this is what they are trying to do here, right? You have a class hierarchy that should in the end cover everything and somehow be meaningful in the sense it's organized. That's very interesting. Okay, now to close this part on Wikidata RDF, here's just the final thing we did. So we actually created RDF exports of this stuff recently. So if you're interested in that, you can get these files at this address. It's also linked from my, well, I have links for that at the end of this slide. So. We will also publicize that a bit more once it's more stable. We want to have regular dumps generated on the labs server, so you can really get regular snapshots of Wikidata in RDF if you're interested. And we split the data into several files here to make it a bit easier for people to use. So if you just want to have the terms, like all the labels and all the descriptions, you can just download one file, and if you want to have the statements, you can download another file. You can also merge them, of course, but you don't have to get everything every time. So, for example, if you just are interested in the hierarchy and the taxonomy, then it's quite a small file you have to download. So this is quite nifty, actually. If you want to provide some kind of navigation or organization for content on some other site. Okay, so this is roughly what we get, and you can see here in total this is about 300, 400, more like 400 or more than 400 million triples, which is quite good already as a data set, considering how young Wikidata is. Okay, so this was a bit of an excursion into the world of RDF, and the question, of course, is now how these things can be used, what can be done with that. But our hope is that it makes it again a bit easier for people who are working in that space to transfer data and to integrate data with each other. And maybe also if they use semantic media with RDF, they could also take some of this data and import it. But again, you have seen from these encodings that this is not always trivial. It's not just, okay, case RDF, and it's completely clear what it means. You have to know the encoding, you have to understand what the graph structure is that you find in the RDF in order to do something. Okay, and this is what I mentioned. There's some links, so you can really get more details if you are interested. This is the most recent work really just finished writing this. I hope it will publish it. Okay, so thanks a lot for this, and now I would go back to the original question and answer session that was announced here. If somebody has RDF related questions. Yes.
One, mentioned in earlier design document for the data RDF export, one of the possibilities is using those graphs to allow qualification sort of at the graph level instead of at the statement level. So it seems that the path we've gone will accommodate that in the future. That all of those things that are hanging off of that statement. No.
I think it's not completely true. So maybe I can repeat the question for the remote audience. So the question was about how named graphs come in here. Can you use named graphs to encode some of this more efficiently, or is it compatible? And the answer is, as our design documents also suggested. So first of all, let me say what named graphs are. The idea is with named graphs that you can put a set of triples into a box and give it a name. And for example, and this is maybe the most obvious application here, we could put our main triple, Douglas Adams, spouse, Jane Belson, into a box and give this box a name, and then we could attach further things about this statement to the box. So we wouldn't need reification, but we would just annotate the box, basically, the named graph. Now, would this fly in practice? Not sure. I mean, the named graphs originally, as far as I understand, are viewed like databases in a relational database management system. So you can distinguish several data sets in your input. Now, in our case, if we do that for every statement, we would have like 35 million different named graphs. I'm not sure if every database is really happy with this type of use, but I think there are some, at least I've heard that. So that could definitely be done. The main advantage of this would be that you get rid of one join if you want to just query for the spouse of some person. What would not be an advantage is memory in any case. So storing these references will take about the same memory that you would need anyway, so it's not saving anything in terms of memory. It's also not simplifying anything down here. So for example, the complex value, this complex time value, which has several components, would not be stored any more efficiently with named graphs. There's no good way, what would you do here with named graphs? The problem we have here is not that we want to say something about a triple, which we could nicely put into a named graph. The problem is simply that one object has several components which we have to describe. So all of this would remain the same. Also for the references, it would remain the same. We could, even the references you can't really put into a single into a named graph, because you need the reference node here as a subject to these triples. So again, named graphs won't simplify anything about that. So really the only place where it would make a difference is this main part of the statement. I guess we could have an alternative export where we use this encoding if people want that. Right now we are seeing if anybody wants this RDF at all, and then if there are requests like that, we can easily accommodate.
If you draw just to clarify something that you pointed out, and people just do the long interval.
Yes.
Here's the identifier for a particular state.
Yes.
These are circle statements that you're identifying.
Oh, this is the statement.
So the whole, so the identifier of the entire.
Yeah. So this is this statement really as a whole. Actually, the long identifier is even stored in Wikidata. So Wikidata has its own identifiers for statements, which is used in the API to communicate. So you can make changes to a statement and can refer to it repeatedly. That's why a panel identifier already in the system, and we just use this identifier. So it really identifies the whole box.
So the way you can read that then means 242 has the following statement made about it, and then that statement has all of those.
Yeah, well, yes, but we use here the property used to connect Douglas Adams with the statement is already specific to spouse. So it has this, we could already filter for spouse statements. It's not a generic has statement property. But yeah, otherwise it's exactly like that. And of course, what you can see here, we don't attempt to map all the conceptual structure to RDF, because as I explained before, we really have a claim, and the reference refers to the claim. And the claim already has the qualifier. So if we would be extremely strict, we could even introduce two auxiliary nodes, one for the claim and then another one for the statement. That's not something we want to do. So the idea is really to have the simplest encoding, even though it's not very simple here, for this in RDF. David had a question?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. Still under development, but I'm wondering if there is any sort of integrate Google Editor with and the second question is, are there any external uses of the image approach?
Okay, so these are, I can only answer this partially because, well, Visual Editor is not related to Wikidata.
I understand, but it's usable as a value, especially on things.
Ah, that's what you mean. So you mean in the setting where somebody integrates Wikidata information into Wikipedia, that you can edit in spot the Wikidata information without going to Wikidata first. We have thought about that, and it might be possible, but it's not something currently being worked on. So there are higher priority things first. For example, having a way to get the data into Wikipedia in the first place. So that would be, but it seems to be something that is quite possible, much more possible than it is for SMW, because with SMW it's very hard to trace back where the value comes from. So you could have a query entry. It would be very nice, wouldn't it, if you could in SMW just edit the printouts in a query to change the actual values. So, but this is very difficult because it's so impossible to trace back where the value actually came from. Maybe you use some template, maybe you constructed it by string operations in a template which were based on some condition that is based on the current date when the page was edited, whatever. You can't really trace that back. So in SMW, it's very difficult to have this type of writing facility in general, whereas in Wikidata, it's quite easy. You know where the stuff comes from and you could make it writable. So in principle, it is very realistic that we will have that at some point, especially once we have simple queries and we can really have like a table generated from Wikidata, having the information editable there by using the same JavaScript components that are already used now to edit Wikidata would be really possible. Especially since there's also the unified login through the Wikimedia namespace, so you could use your current user identity to edit there as well.
Are there any
external users of Wikidata right now? Well, no major applications come to my mind which are completely external, like another organization using it in a large scale for a specific project that I could tell. There are a number of users of Wikidata that you can find on the web, which are mainly done by the community, so I don't know if they qualify as external in any way. Interesting, yes, that's very much interesting. I should show you this because there are really some very interesting things. So, let's see. So there is a list of external tools which is updated from time to time on Wikidata, and it has a lot of interesting things. For example, let's go and have a look at the American Civil War. So many of these tools are created by Magnus, who does a brilliant job in exploiting this data and showing creative ways of how to use it. So this, for example, is a display of information or of well, I think in this case, battles in American Civil War based on Wikidata information, which is current up to the hour at least, maybe minute, which shows both the location of the battles on a map and the time of the battles in a timeline, and allows you to navigate through that. And I like that thing. So the idea here is on the map that transparency is used to indicate things which are in the future from the currently selected time point or in the past. Not sure which is which here, and I'm not sure if this is the most readable way of displaying it, but it's certainly a nice idea. And you can really see here what happened after in what time, and you can maybe even try to get an idea, a spatial-temporal idea of how the battles moved over this country. So that's a very nice thing. It fits with various other applications. Basically, this is a generic tool. You can use it for anything. I think here we have one where graves of people on Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris are shown, and the time is zoom a bit here to see something. The time here is, of course, the time when these people were buried there. I think, or I guess, the reasonable time. So you can see here so this is quite nice. So if you are in a city and you want to do cemetery tourism, this might also be a really nice application for the future. There are many other very cool things. Okay, there was an outdated tree of life, the Reasonator, of course, which is like a nicer way to display Wikidata here. It tells you already Wikidata is pretty, so you can see what it has to say about battle patterns. So it's a bit cramped now because of the small screen, so it's not so pretty as it could be actually. Maybe I can make it smaller to show you and give you an idea what the normal layout is. So this is the normal layout, where you have the properties which are most important for a person shown in a more visible way, and the IDs that are less important to a casual reader lost somewhere else, and so made into a page which is actually useful for people. And this is called Reasonator because it actually also applies some amount of reasoning in order to find out, for example, I think what family relationships are visualized. So there is a way to have a full family tree here and stuff like that. It's not very large in this case, but for some people it's quite significant. So and you can see here some amount of time information even. Yes, so this is another application that we have. So and there are a number of other things which are quite cool. Miga, you have already seen the Lawrence demo yesterday. I'm not sure if there's anything else I should show now. So you can browse it. Some of these things are also connected. But another nice tool, Danny has recently proposed a JavaScript library where you can translate anything on a web page based on Wikidata content. Multilingual map is a precursor of that idea. It's not based on this library yet, but you can see here that a map of India with the regions of India labeled in English, and I can now change that. I would expect to be able to somehow change that, but I don't quite. I just should type it. So I can change that to once. Did that actually do something? Let's see if that is Hebrew is maybe more. Yeah, so this is the Hebrew version of it. So this shows how you can translate things that are hard to translate, which I already mentioned yesterday. And this is just a little demo here with an atlas. But we now have a JavaScript library that you can embed in arbitrary web pages, where you just say, instead of writing the label for something at a certain location in your web page, you add a JavaScript call that uses the true ID of the Wikidata page, and it will just give you the label in the language that is selected.
Which tool would you use that Google Maps with long-term for use in native language?
we maybe should talk to Jenny about that. Okay. Okay, I think I'm running out of time and you want to have coffee, but is there any other one more question maybe? So just comment what if you are interested in motion. One more thing I would like to mention here is again the data toolkit, which we hope to use to really make it more easy for people to write us applications. To also get the data into their own thing. So something I should show you maybe is a different type of applications which is more directed towards research. So this is maybe something of interest. That's a bit of an older page. There was also a very recent one now updated for that, where somebody, Max Klein in this case, studied the ratio of sex in people who have articles on Wikipedia. So to find out which are the Wikipedias where we have the highest ratio of women, which are the ones with the lowest. So this is an application which is not a search or browsing or web application, it's a research application where you are interested in finding out something about Wikipedia and doing more like offline analysis. And Max has also used the data toolkit now for some of these things recently. So that's a completely different direction to also look into, to use the data set as a whole and to try to analyze it and to understand something interesting about how Wikidata or the world or Wikipedia works. Okay. Thank you.
So there's coffee and breakfast. You just have to make it out of work.
Oh, breakfast too. No, half an hour is not just like a reference. You can say, since we continue with that on tutorial day, should we focus more on general and third course and other course
What kind of food do you have here? Oh, three prong. Yeah, that's difficult. I don't have that one. Otherwise, you could have used another. No, we can do it from there.
Thanks.
You got power?
You want to click if you like.
when it starts, to recognize yes, a regular mouse. You know, how this works. You have the presentation also. This is the relation forward that is open for presentation. People? People? Peter Billy? Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The original was John is the one.
While maintaining the visual and then of course you end up with a lot of version the things that fall into entities that elements that have to be so you have to pick that more that means that highlight those is there anything that we do you know
So you can have what's scheduled thinking. Yeah, and that's one concept that as not no matter what, how
yeah, but I can understand that
that's how I don't know the audio for and we are the full thing that we're going now that don't have any magic cards. The magic are, you know,
you can define the questions that.
Yeah, so we have certain concepts that we need to be taken back on the system. We have EDC file or XP or whatever data comes from the repository metadata references that we want to use. We upload the references or the reference metadata that the link is made in concept that lists reference. So that's how we maintain we do that processing the reference metadata after the report and use it every time we use website.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
Yeah. So every time that we establish an application, we have to make a fully where it originates, where it is. And especially when you work with important data sets. That's kind of the I'll be calling you all the way up September or so.
Yes, and the plan is to present at the end
And then we have easy enough. How are you?
what's the calendar?
And they will You're a multi-platform? Yeah, well, are we also comfortable with the sound presentation and that?
Apparently today the audio works remotely properly. Can't hear me.
So, ah.
Micro enough. It's not on the wiki yet, but at the end of the day, as it is traditional as a W, probably will have
There's a community discussion for gathering feedback about the event and how it event. Keep around. That will be the end of the Facebook service. So our plan is how we want to go forward. What happened in the
Hi everyone, I am Emma. I am Emma, I am PhD student in the last laboratory in Toulouse, and I have the pleasure to share with you our experience with the semantic modality for the scientific organization and the research activity management. So I will start my presentation by presenting the context and the motivation that pushes us to think about conceiving such platform. And I will enumerate the requirements that we need to consider when developing the platform. Then I will illustrate the main functionality of our platform and conclude the presentation by presenting the next step that we will take in a few months. So just an overview about the hierarchical organization of our laboratory. So here is the last CMRS in Toulouse, and it is composed of 8 research labs. So we have the critical informatics, network and communication where I belong. And each research lab is already composed of research teams. We have around 22 research teams. So I belong to the Sarah team, and each team in turn is composed of team members, and this is such an inventory of this month. And we noted indeed that in this hierarchical, that the dynamicity within this level is more significant in the team members. So this dynamicity can be explained as that we have the team leader, we have team leaders who supervise the PhD students, and in turn these PhD students can work with trainees or visitors that join our team. So the first thing that there is a lot of members that can join our team. So for example here, and also members can change profile. For example, last year I was a trainee and now I am PhD. And also some members can leave our team. And this relation between the different members can be, it is not indeed limited to the supervisor. So we can, for example, take this example. Okay? So 2 PhD students can collaborate together. For example, the output of one can be the input of the other, and you have a new scientific contribution. And also, within in the team, research team, we can find groups. For example, my supervisor and all PhD students are specific or specialized in a domain. So we can find some groups. The question that you have is how we can give traces about this dynamicity within the group. Moreover, so each member is evaluated by the contributions that they produce. And this contribution will be also the support to evaluate the research team and to evaluate the quality of the scientific contributions. So to get the scientific contributions and specifically to elaborate the research activity report that in general at the end of the year that we need to elaborate it, there is 3 ways. First, the team leaders need to organize meetings with the different team members to get a detailed view about how on what these members are working on, or we can exchange emails to get some information. And in general, maybe we cannot have a complete answer about what we need, or we can consult so the searching the website of the lab, and we can get the papers and try to read the papers to get this contribution. But in general, all these 3 solutions are timely codes because we cannot indeed understand well what the papers are describing. For example, if we are not from the domain, and also the information is everywhere and is poorly organized. So, how to manage the scientific contributions in a machine-human understandable format in order to reuse this knowledge, and also how to dynamically generate the activity report of the team for the evaluation. So the requirement first, we need to transfer the knowledge because each member has already the classification of the contribution in mind. But sometimes, even if we write papers on publication, it is not well organized. We have some paragraphs, and we cannot so figure out about this classification. The second one is the collaboration between the different members based on a user-friendly interface. It is very important because not all the research members can use semantic media wikis. Also, we need to provide a common model to annotate the scientific contribution because if we belong to a research team, we have research access, and we need to provide a common model in order to cover all the members' contributions. And how we can reuse this knowledge to up-to-date information about the competence and the skills of our research team. And finally, is the evolution of the ontology of the evolution of the knowledge. How we can add new concepts and we add new answers for the ontology. So based on this requirement, we thought about the semantic web technologies and as an implementation semantic media wikis. And our interactive knowledge sharing for research activity management functionality has two. So the platform has two functionalities. We can find the management of the staff or the administrative organization, and the second part, which is related to the scientific contribution. So the platform allows to classify the scientific contributions according to the research team area and domain, and also it allows the dynamic generation of reports, activity reports for the evaluation. And the output of the platform of this organized knowledge will allow the expert, in our case, the leader of the team, first to identify the team skills up to date, to evaluate the quality of the research compared to the scientific evolution, and also even to plan for a new research direction, so according to the scientific evolution. So we follow this methodology in order to conceive the ontology. So first, this methodology is composed of two phases. The first one is organizing the knowledge, and here we work with the tenures of our research team in order to identify the different keywords that they work on, and after that we try to identify the ontology or the research ontology that will be the basis for the annotation, for the scientific contribution. The second part is the knowledge reusing, and here we have two phases: the knowledge consumption and the knowledge production. So we have external users can contact our platform to have an overview of the numbers on which they are working, and the second one is the research members that need to annotate their contribution and provide the productions that evaluate or valorize these contributions. Even we think about using the data transfer extension because we can export the publications. So export this publication from the website of the laboratory and then inject these publications in the platform. So all this is based on semantic media wiki and other extensions. For just an overview about the platform, we use Mediality for the collaboration, semantic Mediality for the annotation, for the semantic annotation, some other extensions like semantic forms to provide a user-friendly interface, and also the LDAP authentication. So we need this extension. For the scheme, we use the Bootstrap. And just an idea about the ontology, the network and communication ontology, we have some categories here, some example of categories. You have scientific contribution, valorization, contractual project, and so it is around 90 categories where we find 24 categorized categories. And here are the property, data, and object properties. So just here some snapshots about the platform. Here, for example, my page. We can find all the details related to my page. And after fulfilling the different pages and categorizing or annotating my contribution, here we can find a kind of graph in which we describe the collaboration and the contribution. So just a summary about on what I'm working and with who. So, for example, if I detail the PhD, my PhD, here we can find some description of my PhD, the date, on what I am working, the institution, and I can add contributions. So here, for example, the scientific knowledge sharing and organization. And in this stage that I need to annotate my contribution. So here we say that the scientific contribution is characterized by I need to address challenges, I have objectives, I have there is some skills, the research domain, applicative domain, approach, the method that I use, and the techniques. So here, so all these three are categories, and we try to annotate each contribution based on the ontology that we work with the experts. So here, for example, an overview, general information about my contribution, and here for the scientific approach. So in my case, I am using a model-based approach, and here I need to justify why I'm using this model-based. So this information will be useful to generate the report activity of the team. For the method, in my case, I use ontologies. There is other methods that other members in my team that we use. And here, so we use ontologies and semantics to cover the heterogeneity problem. And finally, the technologies. In this case, I use the semantic web technology. Here, I select the use tool. For example, for me, it's semantic mediality. And if the tool does not figure in the list, we can so add. There is the possibility to add new knowledge to the system. And add technique is the annotation-based technique. Okay, so after characterizing the contribution, this contribution is valorized by production. So we have identified the list of the type of production. It can be a project delivery, it can be produce a tool, a platform, framework, or the scientific publication. So the idea behind is to give the users to select this, and when saving the page, we will be automatically redirected to the appropriate form to fulfill the information. Yes. So, okay, just an example for the scientific contribution. We have the type, journal, book, or conference. We have also here a statute. So this paper has a statute, published or to appear, so it's a time. And also we try from the annotation that we associated to the scientific contribution to extract this annotation and to associate it to the production. So the user can even keep on this annotation or add new annotations. Here we weighted also this production. So we say that if production has a relevance, it can be A, B, C, and this based on this relevance that we will evaluate the productions of our research team. Also, we associated the publications to the contractual project, and it will be useful when we write the summary of the year, for example, about this contractual project. So here, just after saving, we can navigate to read the summary. And here we annotated in these all the article or the contribution using the previous annotations. Okay. The second part is for the ontology evolution. Okay, so we can based on the tree that we provided, we can check the boxes to annotate the scientific contribution. But if, for example, I am going to use a new approach that does not figure out in my tree. So here we provide a user-friendly interface where the user can add a new approach. Just here, we need to write the new approach. And when add new approach here, it will appear in the tree, and the user can classify this new approach according to the categories that we have. So if there is no classification, just you need to put approach, just to categorize this as a new approach. And after saving, in this case, we are creating a new category, which is a subcategory of another approach, of the selected category. Okay, so what I already explained is in the production, is in the production process, and now we need to consume indeed this knowledge that we annotated. So we use semantic queries to do that assistant function, and here, for example, we try to make some formulas in which we can make the survey of our contribution. Here an example. For example, if we are going to write a proposal for a project, for a new project, and this project is related, for example, to the healthcare domain. In this case, I need to have an overview about the contributions within my team that already work on this domain. So we can get this, for example, by checking the research domain, applications and distributed, for example, distributed applications and services, the domain, and we can so display the elements that we need: the title, the contribution, detailed contribution, or the approach. And after that, we think that it is difficult to predict what the user needs. Maybe he needs the contribution that just make some combination. Indeed, I would like the contribution that deal with the knowledge model approach, and for example, that address the heterogeneity or the dynamics. So here we try to predict all the combinations. And for example, in the knowledge model, you can get this result. Yes. So the title and the description of the contribution. Also, we can generate the activity report. And here we distinguish the title scopes. For example, I can generate a report which is specific to this task. For example, monthly. I can get this from the knowledge that I already, from the information that I annotated. We can also generate reports specific to the research group or to the members that working on specific areas. Also, for the research team, and here we get all the staff, the objectives of the team, the methods and scientific approaches that we have already annotated, the highlights and major achievements based on the relevance of the productions, the significant project and collaboration, and also so the tools that we produce and the demonstration that we have made. And finally, we can even solve for the first level of the research lab or the whole institution. And here we to evaluate indeed the platform and the completeness of the ontology that we conceive, we try to elaborate a kind of feedback about if this platform is user-friendly interface, if the ontology that we propose to annotate the scientific contribution is completed, if also the platform is open, so we can add new contributions, either categories or individuals. So here just we made it and we try to make some graphs using semantic result format. Okay, so to conclude, we have tried to make to provide a shareable knowledge management platform, either to manage the staff of the organization, or even to manage the research activities and scientific contribution. So the basis, we try to elaborate this ontology or research ontology that will be the basis for the scientific contribution allocation, and we elaborated queries and semantic queries for the dynamic generation of activity reports of the research team. So what we plan now is we are working now on the semantic access control. We are trying to manage this semantic access within a type of scope. For example, if I belong to a group, I need just to read and write within the pages that belong to this group, and if for example, and I can only read the pages of the other groups. And here, for the knowledge completeness, indeed, we are indeed searching about if there is some existing extension that allow us to discover new knowledge from the external repository and import this, for example, the publication and dynamically annotate it. And thank you for your attention. We don't know if you have some questions.
Is the group mainly using the tool for, I guess there's a management thing, and there's also sort of like how are we doing research on that?
Now, I started with the visitors and the trainees to fulfill, and now I am so trying to collaborate with the PhD students. So yes, we are working on that. So this is the objective is to all people will be involved in the platform and try to annotate this knowledge.
So, in the main observation, there's a couple of presenters that mentioned similar functionalities that originally the wiki was wide open and everybody we have access to all the information, but now we're developing extensions and other features to make it more difficult to either edit or to use and share information. Is it something that you all see as a logical development of the maturization of a media wiki?
So definitely happens always with like I guess it's a sign that you're reaching an audience that reaching before, or that people are thinking more broadly about the use case.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, to me that it's sort of paradox, not really a paradox, but I mean the problem is that the reason why you went to the book in the first place is all that access stuff. You don't budget up the knowledge there on the platform.
Exactly. So in my case, there are a lot of people that are eager to join, to get access to a wiki. They are eager to use it for their own work, but they want to see everything that everybody offers. They want to control everything that they have, which is, completely opposite of the philosophy behind what is on the wiki.
I think it just, to me, it just sort of illustrates what I think probably everyone in this room is internalized the massive, you understand what the wiki way is, but it takes years for people to stop talking about, their site or your page or, some sort of implicit suggestion you need permission to go do things, and probably anyone deletes other people's stuff, they just add. So even when they do take full step everything.
I think the line you brought up that in the scientific community, a lot of people are wanting to put their stuff out there because there's risk that people will get criticized. And I don't think that's unique. A lot of people feel that way. Once I put it out there, You might not like what I did. You might say I've done it wrong and it will this. So I'll
But the focus I was saying, there was I was briefed by the legal department why
Yeah, well, we've done the same thing that you mentioned yesterday, which is leave sensitive documents in places with access control, like SharePoint, and point to them or annotate them in the
that's the point I was making to the legal department. The stuff, the artistic stuff that we are is stuff, knowledge that we can be found easily on the web. It's just that the whole knowledge it was too spread out. There's nothing so good, super, at least in the music portion of the database. But I actually made my point.
So the feature that you're developing, that you talked about at the end, the semantic access control, is that something that you will open up the open source community, or is it specific for your lab?
Indeed, the semantic access control already exists, but I am going to use it according to my requirements because we can access, we already have available semantic access control. But we are trying to how to use this extension to control the pages and not just users who belong to this group, because we can type pages, how we can make the control on pages and not on the users. This is what I am trying to do. How long for the production of the knowledge and for the development of the platform. Yes. Indeed, I started to collaborate with members 1 month ago, maybe. But I think that, but we tried to provide a simple user interface for them. So they try just to check something. So it's not so hard to do that. But I don't know if after that they will keep doing that. This is so another. For the numbers, in general, we have some collaboration in so it is easier if we can connect to the platform and see what the others are working on and the production and all. So I think it is some code and the code that we have already developed so and sharing the knowledge and the expertise of the others. For example, if I'm using some technology, and I know that the other has already used it, so I need directly to do some papers and to contact the person.
In terms of procedures, are we catching our solutions which you always use and deciding on my thinking around this thing is that rather developing is quite a effective solution, and these infrastructures are not meant to live by themselves. They're not for people. And
there are there is some limit done by the language when she showed the book about the symbolic time and these aspects. And there's a community of people that are working on how to develop social and cultural and collective intelligence around the question of art and posting. There are different art and posting communities in the world. And we believe the project that I was done, was following, I was just, it's fundamental. We need to work as hard as on the infrastructure as we work on our collaboration processes and act towards having people identifying their issues and concerns about if I put a new face in the wiki, will I be punished or something like that. And it's very, very important to develop, I think, in our people users of the wiki, those social aspects of what is going out. The article for me is very, very thing to look at to make our work easier and make the organization more effective around this instead of adding them in corrupt practices. Adding them corrupt the way of making access and organize just to suit their own. Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience to do the research, but I usually work with people. And everything I was from to sometimes the organization are asking for that because I try to see what I don't see. You can do that with some and sometimes I'm going because I need to put everything in place like normally I think it's study and then slowly I relax and I make it down to the goal.
One aspect here, of course, is that legality is notoriously bad at supporting your way. And there's also something hard to make when you speak about how legality should be involved, right? Not make some ideas on that. And I could actually imagine that one template can into the system in this way with some specific efforts. For example, using content models. I mentioned that in my data talk that now media supports content models, which basically allow you to have special encoding and every access to that data goes through control interface. And we use that into data because internally everything is JSON and not everything that somebody will put into this or in the editing or anywhere will never be that JSON, but will always be filtered by appropriate interpreters that know how to use that JSON. Now I could imagine instead of changing the format internally, once you have this architecture, it really allows you to capture the internal block in all places and filter it and do everything in appropriate place. You could think about using this implement. Of course, caching still is a bad thing, but somehow I think these changes in media that have been managed to get clear basis for implementing that community system on design. What can the content model the content handler, because with these changes it was that for the first time one has tried to really capture all the places where the content that is being stored in the data is propagated somewhere up to the content. And if you use all of these, if you have control over all of these places, it could be enough to have at least a page level access control. So here's what to do that.
Maybe if you want to implement volunteer. Oh, also I need stuff. visual anchor on that one.
When it's right and it's open, it's coming. I want you to false flag. Yeah, it's coming. Is there HDMI? So I can just plug in. You have we're running a mess on for it. Because I'm going to have to some new things for it and Colorado. You guys got Dr. Stone? Oh, yes, again. Somebody wants to volunteer on the server, I think this is find out why we have our only errors every other day. Oh, you know what? You know what? Maybe your memory is not there. I don't think so. No. I'll just put out a middleman. Okay. Yeah, in my experience with, I don't know, the fear that people experience at the beginning of setting up a wiki, you know, so I worked with a technical society that was just really worried about vandalism and people putting wrong information in the wiki and stuff like that. So really wanted to kind of close it down and have it members only and no new accounts and you know, what's it called, the versioning thing for flagrets, I think it's called, the pages, and put all this stuff in place and all this governance with people who did approve changes and so on. And just like, it feels like you're defending against something that is not going to happen, basically. You know, and when that fear-driven stuff just shuts it down right from the beginning, and it's really hard for people to kind of get over it. It's scary. So, you know, I really like what Fiona just said, and you know, we have to educate people or help them go out a little bit, and you know, kind of wait for the problems to come to you rather than kind of trying to fix all the problems that you don't have. Has everyone heard about these new top-level domains? I just heard about them by accident, so I thought I'd mention them. The .wiki domain just became available about a week ago, and you can go reserve things. I think until Monday, and then there's going to be some kind of, they'll hand out all the early reserved ones, and then it will be generally available. So you can't actually get it. This is the, I don't know what they call it, but like the administrator for the domain. But I reserved one at name.com. I usually use hover.com because they're awesome and Canadian and stuff. But they didn't have the .wiki domain available yet, so I used name.com. And yeah. So go to name.com and just search on a .wiki domain that you want, and it will give you the options, just like normal. If you're interested in having yet another domain to kind of look after and administrate. Yes, that's a sort of public service announcement. Yeah, so I'm Wing Pants on wikis and Twitter and stuff like that. I have my own small consulting company. I live in Nova Scotia, Canada, which is sort of past, like you just go to Maine and keep going out into the sea, and that's where Nova Scotia is, part of Atlantic Canada. Beautiful part of the world, underpopulated, in great need with young people, especially with kids who want to come do awesome things, and hang out in our little co-working space and stuff like that. And I do all my work with clients mostly in the US, so I'm mostly working online from my co-working space, and like a third of what my company does is on kind of geology and geophysics consulting, like interpreting wells and seismic data and remote sensor stuff, and a third of it is building tools like web apps and mobile apps, because we're into that kind of thing, mostly for geophysicists, so they're kind of quite specialized scientific computing tools. And then about a third of it is knowledge sharing stuff, and that's where I do kind of hacking around with wikis and so on. But I'm really interested in, kind of connecting those dots and using the wiki stuff in our web apps and mobile apps and that kind of thing. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I sort of feel like over my career, I've, you sort of go through this cycle from, at least for me, I only speak for myself, I guess, from kind of obliviousness to what at least feels like enlightenment. Where first you know nothing, and then you get a job, and you're a practitioner, and you're carrying on, and then you start to realize, hang on a minute, all this stuff that I thought was going to be awesome, like I'm working in this giant multi-billion-dollar company with loads of IT people, and so it should be like gold-plated wickedness around every corner, and you gradually start to realize, like just asking for very simple things. Oh, I need some data from this particular part of the world, or what have we ever done in, I don't know, this part of the North Sea, and nobody knows. And it's this sort of bizarre, basically a system, not really a system, but this bizarre accidental universe of sort of gatekeepers. And oh yeah, you want to know that? You have to go ask that guy. And this has gradually become more and more urgent as people talk about this sort of demographic shift and people are starting to retire. Well, actually, they're not starting to retire because they're starting to realise that they're so bloody valuable that they can just sort of sit around and make scabs of money and and retire a bit later. And when you add the stock market crashes and stuff to that, that sort of helps. But those people are still here just about. But they will leave eventually, and there are great big industries. Like I do a lot of work in the energy industry, mostly oil and gas, but also geothermal and other sort of natural resources. These industries hire a lot of undergraduates, or people with degrees, but not advanced degrees on the whole. And those people are going to be running this stuff pretty soon, and the guy down the corridor won't be there anymore. And so it's going to be quite scary if we don't fit some of them. Anyway, so that's the critical part. And then you sort of gradually find yourself in a position where you can actually change some of this stuff. And at that point, you either kind of essentially check out and don't change it because it's too hard. Or you go, rah, change all the things. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I left my company corporate job in Calgary a few years ago, moved to Nova Scotia, and now I'm kind of on the outside, which is both freedom and a little bit of a limiter. It's a resource limitation, but I'm sort of infinitely free to do things like stand-up wikis and social media and all that kind of stuff. So here's a picture of a sort of knowledge management scenario inside a big company, and all these people are basically trying to sort of dig the goodness out of all the chaos of shared drives and personal drives and pen drives and taking things home. And actually, I was in a meeting recently and heard a new phrase which I've never heard before. Maybe you guys heard it. It was white glove treatment. So the sort of data administrators now are saying, oh, we have this white glove service, which to me is a sort of classic recognition that our systems are so awful and everything's such a mess that you need a butler or some person with white gloves on. to kind of help you. And anyway, someone made the remark like, "Oh, are we talking about rubber gloves here? Because those are white gloves too." You know, I don't know where my data is, but I don't know if someone had it. Anyway, I heard a really good quote recently about that really resonated with me about this data management, knowledge management stuff. I don't like the phrase knowledge management because that can really manage knowledge. It's sort of knowledge curation or whatever you want to call it, which was attributed to exactly so let's say that he said it. And he said, apparently, if you've had the same problem for a long time, perhaps it's not a problem, perhaps it's a fact. And I just think that's precisely right when it comes to things like data. And you have to stop trying, like basically if you unleash a bunch of engineers with their, you know, software engineers, virtual engineers, whatever, on a data management problem, they immediately build this massive hierarchy of folders and start moving files into them, and now it's all clean and tidy and we're done. And that process takes ages and causes lots of fights about things like ontologies. They don't realize that's what they're fighting about. And you know, a year later, it might as well not have happened because it's all, you know, gone up in flames again because it didn't actually fix any of the things that were causing that, like access control and or lack of access that people have, or you know, lack of knowledge about how to do things, and lack of tagging and no good search and all the other things that you find in the enterprise. So you know, I guess. As a, you know, I'm a scientist, I've got stuff I want to do, I really like wikis, so Semantic Media Wiki was a total kind of awesome revelation for me a couple of years ago when I, you know, just stumbled on it and started playing with it. And I'm really glad we've had all these great discussions about Wikidata and stuff, because I've been kind of struggling with, you know, storing data inside the wiki, which I kind of, for me at least, I kind of feel like that's what Semantic Media Wiki does. And I like that because it's in context, it's right where you need it, the data is kind of where you expect it to be. If you want to change it, well, there it is, just go change it. But you kind of don't have any good attribution, you know, the reference may or may not be there, it's not directly associated, and so on. And then there's this kind of idea of having an external, or what turns out can be an internal, I guess can be another namespace, essentially, in the same wiki, but essentially having a data store which is sort of contiguous in and of itself, and the wiki just kind of asks for the bits of data it needs when it needs them. And until hearing Marcus talk about it, basically I didn't really understand what the benefits of that were, and I think I see those now. And then, as I understand it, things like Wikipedia are sort of going the other way and just trying to essentially tolerate the chaos in the wiki and use some intelligence and some, you know, scraping and parsing to say, oh, this looks like data, I'll store this. And so, I don't know, I guess just like anything else in technology, it's a completely constantly evolving picture, and there's no, you know, you can choose something to work with for now, but it's not like that choice is necessarily going to be the right choice in 5 years. So I guess we just have to get used to the idea that it is, you know, kind of like your situation right now, where Wikidata is probably going to be awesome in a couple of years when it's got queries and stuff, but right now so then we have to build things which are tolerant of that coming change, right? So the advantage of doing something now with Semantic Media Wiki is then your data's semantic, and so it doesn't really matter. You can do anything you like with it. You can put it as CSV if you want. You can export it to Wikidata if you want. Anyway, so I work on, or I guess right now, the kind of, not counting Wikipedia, 4 wikis that I care about. I can't talk about one of them because it's a commercial, you know, it's inside an enterprise. It's by far the most exciting because it's got probably almost 10,000 pages now, I think, hundreds of semantic properties, and we're using Semantic Media Wiki all the time. So I won't talk about that. But I've got these other 3.5 that I care about. At the top there, APG and SEG are 2 big organizations for geologists and geophysicists in sort of minerals, energy, in that kind of applied industrial geoscience sector. And they've both recently set up these wikis. They're seeding them with content from their books, you know, 1 or 2 books essentially. A book can generate a few hundred wiki pages. And, you know, there's some interesting questions there around, you know, is it still a book when it's in the wiki, and if someone changes it, now what is it, and that kind of thing. But I respect both these organizations for having the guts to kind of sort of basically relicense their stuff, because they're both using CC by SA licenses, and be willing to sort of give it a try. And they're both, well, the APG, the geologists wiki, we just built, I built this for them, and it's got semantic stuff in it right from the start. Right now, just for bibliographic information for these books that we've put in there. But if anyone can create an account on that wiki, we've got a confirm account extension in place, because it got nailed by spam, like, within days, basically, of getting into the internet. So in my experience, confirm account is the best sort of anti-spam control, because the sandboxes don't request these accounts, but of course it does put a lot of people off, so it's not totally open anymore, I guess. SCG, these two chaps here work for SCG, and I'm a member of SCG. It's kind of my home society. So I've been doing some volunteering on that wiki, and really want to see it become the awesome thing it can be. It's not semantic yet. It has thousands of pages, I guess. Many are very short because it proceeded with content from the encyclopedic dictionary. So it's comprehensive, but shallow. And then I also helped get this one off the ground as a reservoir engineer. These are the people who were terrified of spam and everything else, and vandalism, and so essentially you can't make an account on there, everything is copyright. It's like, I'm not that interested anymore in that wiki. It's really cool content, it's decently high quality, but just pick it. And then that's my wiki over there, subsurfwiki.org, and it's, I'm just a guy, so it's kind of a sandbox for me, because I get to be, full admin, and I can go do anything I like in there. But, just like everyone else, I've got big dreams about what it could be, and some of the stuff that I want to do with my apps, my web apps and mobile apps, I will probably do on that platform. So I'm hoping to create a large number of pure data pages in there soon. I'll show that soon. I think a lot about, and actually do a lot of work on community building around these things, usually inside of organizations. But these wikis, or three of them, all of them came about basically through a generous donation from an oil and gas company that said, hey, we want some scientific wikis in the world. And so now we have three of them. I worry a bit that the community needs to about 35,000 people, and it's probably about 18,000 members, I think, something like that. Which is a lot, but these are all professionals who are terrified of, basically work in a very conservative industry, who aren't used to writing in wikis at all, and so the real community of people who care and who can actually do some of this stuff is probably quite small, very small. So I guess I worry a bit about the sustainability of having these three different wikis. So I think we need to think carefully about that. I'm very interested in being able to do cross-wiki queries. And if we can keep the ontologies aligned, then I'm kind of thinking like down the road at some point we may just end up with them. So one of the things I've been doing a lot of recently is figuring out how to get a bunch of content that's in books and turn it into wiki content. I've poked around a lot and couldn't find anything that does this, but probably someone at me can tell me, oh, you should use this awesome tool. But like I said, I couldn't find anything. Everything I found could sort of take a bold thing and turn it into a bold thing, but my problem was that my bold things were like headings, that's actually should be an H3, and you can only tell that from the fact that it's indented with two tabs or some weird thing like that. So I basically wrote a Python, actually the first time I did it, I used a scraping library. It's a fantastic Python web scraping tool that has this sort of concept of pipelines, and it's sort of like a superpower, basically, because I was initially supposed to be getting this content from the web, and I built that, and it worked really well, and it automatically just uploads everything it finds. In the process, it adds links, it does all the formatting, adds semantics, adds info boxes, changed all the math, everything. I was pretty pleased with it. And then the client came back and said, oh no, actually, can you do all of that but from XML files? And I, well, all right. So I basically rebuilt the entire thing in pure Python. So this sucks up XML books, which have a reasonably predictable format. XML seems to be a bit of a mess, but whatever. You know, just custom build lots and lots of regular expressions, basically, or a combination of regular expressions and parsers. So I'm using something called Beautiful Soup for the parsing, and just Python regex for the regular expression. And same thing. But it tries to be a bit smart, and actually it goes out to other wikis and gets the list of pages, and then if it finds that in the text, it adds links to those other wikis. We're using the InterWiki extension to make short links to them. And so it's got a little bit of kind of intelligence, handles all the references properly and stuff like that. If anyone's like faced with a problem like this, then give me a shout. So I'd love to find another like application for this tool. It would be kind of sad if it just kind of sits there. I should probably open source it. To be honest, I'm a little bit embarrassed about the state of it. It's literally just like 140 pages. So it's pretty fragile, really, and sensitive input. I wanted, just for the benefit of the other sort of relative noobs in here, because no one had mentioned quantities and unit conversion. It's actually one of my favorite features of Semantic Media Wiki, and a lot of scientists that I show it to are like, oh yeah, that's awesome. You know, because at least in our industry, we a lot of subsurface stuff is in imperial units, so there's feet and inches everywhere. There's weird, you know, barrels, and engineers all like using ranking. I mean, I haven't heard of it's like a Fahrenheit absolute scale. It's like Kelvin with Fahrenheit. And so that Semantic Media Wiki handles it natively, which is great. So yeah, it's actually really easy to set up any custom conversion factors, and then you just do this in the property page for your semantic property, and you can say which units you want to see. The temperature you want to build in. So you just say, you know, temperature, things that you can see, and then you can hover over here and you get a little JavaScript pop up. So it's and like I say, people really like it. It's worth installing Semantic Media Wiki just for that feature, in my opinion.
I completely agree. It's the first time ever I hear anybody praising the unit paper. And especially the temperature conversion. Like, yeah. Because, like, you did that so long ago and nobody ever recorded any user.
Really? It's the reason I installed it. It's
especially the temperature. I mean, yeah, we have the temperature built at the front end, conversion.
Right.
So we have an offset.
Yeah, no, we've written other nonlinear converters and stuff.
It's just like actually solved before. If you can't do it in the wiki, how you could do it. And I didn't know anybody that was working at anything.
No. Yeah, that's great. It was undocumented, the range like that. So one of the other things I've been fiddling with is actually having certain conversion factors, like say for currencies, you know, obviously you need to update all the time. And so I do that with a bot in the property page, and I just update them every night. But there's a sort of general problem there that I'd really like to figure out. If anyone's got any advice, I'd love to hear it. Of essentially putting API calls to web services into a wiki page so that when the page renders, it has some, you know, dynamic data. And the other thing I'd quite like to do is set a preference for the user to say, actually, I'd like to always just see feet, not meters, or whatever. But it's you know, icing really. So here's an example of one of my, you know, silly regular expressions to go from the sort of HTML version or something to changing it to temperature. So it's pretty trivial, but like I say, if anyone else is familiar with it. So one of the things I mentioned yesterday, I think, was you know, and this is a general thing I think about knowledge sharing, is it's tempting as knowledge sharing professionals or whatever to just constantly be like pushing stuff, and oh, here's this awesome tool, and here's all this content, and you know, isn't this wonderful? And sometimes forget that you need things pulling on the other side, otherwise you're just sort of building into a vacuum. And so this, I'm this is completely bogus, really, because I'm building and putting things well, so it's really just a way of self-validating. But here's one of the mobile apps that we built a couple of years ago, actually using App Inventor, which is an awesome way to build Android apps if you don't know how to program. And it's pretty trivial, but we were just using the wiki as a way to, it was a place to put documentation. So that was kind of my first sort of foray into using the wiki to provide content for something else. We're actually building an app at one of my clients right now where the app will consume segments of wiki pages as part of its content in a way that is pretty much completely transparent to the user, so most users won't be aware that it's wiki content. And I'm really excited about that because with wiki, like a lot of these projects, sometimes it doesn't have the greatest traction in every segment of the corporation, and I think it's things like that that will help really build it into the daily, work of everybody. Here's another app that just takes some rock properties, so in this case it's speed of sound for P and S waves and density of a rock. And so we're defining an interface with upper and lower rocks, and then the reflectivity of sound at that interface. But really these properties belong to a thing, which is a rock. And right now, if I want to build these kind of models, this is a simple forward model. If I want to build this kind of model, I have to go read the paper, hope that I can find some rock properties, and write them down and then use them. What I'd really like to be able to do is choose some rocks from a list of rocks, and the rock knows its own velocity and it knows its own density. So I've just started a plan. I have a web app now too, which is doing the same thing, so I have to give it some rocks. And these are just hard-coded right now. And then it's forward models, the acoustic properties and the seismic response to those rocks, both on the web and in a mobile app. So I started building a semantic database of rocks. It's super simple right now. I'm using references and just quantities, basically. And my hope is that I can build a large catalog of rocks and then just point all these apps at this. And so this will be a completely open data set. I think I've gone a bit too far on using these identifiers, and I might just go to some random. And I wouldn't mind some advice if anyone can tell me how I can just generate a unique ID when I'm in a form or something. That would be really handy. Otherwise, I make something up. And the other big revelation for me was like RDF and Sparkle. I'd kind of heard these things bandied around and didn't know anything about either of them until coming here. I've been doing everything just through the API with these action asks and passing it essentially an almost ordinary semantic media wiki query and getting back a JSON string, and then I write everything in Python, so I've got lots of libraries I can use to pass JSON back, and then I can get my stuff done. So this is simple query with just saying, show me all the sandstone. I just want to know that I'm BP and row for all sandstones in the database. So it's super easy, just like using semantic media wiki really, but again for the noobs, I guess, maybe it's like, why on earth am I doing this? Well, the wiki has this human readable view, which is just /wiki/page, but media wikis have this machine readable view that you access to api.php/page or whatever you want. Well, there's a different way of I guess asking for things, and you get back actually all sorts of different formats. So this is one of them. But the other is that a machine can read this stuff. I can train a program essentially to do things with the data. So it's an incredible feature of these tools. And there's another sort of application here that's extremely dangerous, so I'm not ready to do this yet, but one of my web apps you can actually pass Python scripts to, nice way, I've got into that. But so right now, nobody can do it. I can upload scripts to this tool. but I sort of think, well, actually, it'd be awesome if I could just have a repository of scripts online that then I can just give it a URL, say, and the wiki is a great place to keep the script. Of course, the problem is then you're kind of prone to that. So this is perhaps a use case where access control might actually be a thing you want to do, like the person who created the script can edit it, say, or some small trusted group or whatever. But anyway, so that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about for the future. And we have a couple of use cases that will go away basically next week and try. We've got some museum-like virtual museum at SEG, has all sorts of geophysical artifacts and human beings and prize winners and so on that we will be semantifying. Some of them already have info boxes, so it'll be a very straightforward process. And the big thing that I'm really excited about is we're starting to get a little bit better open data in industrial geophysics. There's a very, very long road there, but right now we don't even do a good job of kind of exposing and just on discovery of the stuff that is out there. So we wouldn't be storing data in the wiki here because these data sets may be many hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes in size, but we can certainly do a good job of storing the metadata, the location and so on. I haven't been paying attention at all to how long it's taken. Yeah. So yeah, apologies for that. But basically, these are kind of some of the questions I came to this conference with, and I've had just so many awesome conversations with people that I've actually answered several of them, or at least started to understand several of them better. But yeah, just to recap, this is dynamic content thing I'm really interested in. There's links between multiple wikis that came up earlier this morning. I'm really interested in spatial data, a lot of polygons and just all sorts of GIS-like objects to handle, basically. There are plenty of spatial databases out there, so it's not like you need to necessarily create another GIS inside a wiki. But, I guess I haven't really started exploring that yet. One of the things my tools try to do is carry an uncertainty value for every value, so you're not allowed deterministic data, essentially. And I guess I'd really like to find a sort of intuitive way to carry that extra data value so substantially. And this came up yesterday, but I don't know, I must have been on speech tonight, so I didn't quite follow it. I've got this burning impression, it seems like it should be really easy, I can't figure out how to ask for a property of a property. How do you get at the second property of the thing? Is that
There are different things there, I'm not sure about.
Well,
it's property pages.
Yeah, if I'd like to know, I'd like to do a query that gets the birth date of people's spouses.
Oh, yeah, that's a dot. Yeah.
It's a dot, that's all.
And I just put spouse plus birthday.
Okay. Okay. That's awesome. So that's 50% of the reason I came to. Total value for money. Thank you. I'll try hacking on it like right now in case it's yeah, if anyone's got questions, I'd love to not answer them.
So, was the question answer session for you to get answers?
Yeah, no, okay, that is over now. I just, if I email any of you, this is why I'm, yeah.
So, if I understand your work, you're maintaining a couple of wikis for geological societies, but you're also developing new extensions or functions for
I don't, no. I don't maintain either of those other wikis, just my own. I'm like a power user or something, I suppose. And I feel like I don't do PHP or anything, so I'm not developing code. Like, I do a lot of template building and I do a lot of Python like bot scripting.
So if that counts as sort of modifying the behavior of wikis, then yeah, I'll do some of that.
But I've heard now from a couple of people presenting that they build a wiki and then they use a lot of extensions, but then in the end they start developing their own extensions as well because suddenly the set that we already have available is not sufficient for any specific use that you have. Are there really things that you're missing
Yeah,
in the extension set?
I
Maybe there's something that is more for marketers end of the Friday afternoon.
Yeah, right. Unfortunately, I got taken off before that. But so my 2 cents is I tried to keep. I'm a little bit afraid of a lot of customization of the software stack, and that's probably just a stupid fear of my own. But it feels like it. I want things to be as maintainable and kind of sustainable as possible, and so I try to keep that stuff fairly vanilla. Which is why I like building templates, and then the Python stuff. Yeah, some of it is probably other people would build extensions to do some of the stuff I'm doing, and have like patrolling pages, for example. But the upload stuff, so kind of custom because the source and target are so kind of idiosyncratic that I don't know. It's one of those things where all you've got is a hammer and you just go around hammering things, and that's kind of how I am with my limited knowledge of these tools. Everything's a workaround as far as I'm concerned. But
Oh yeah.
I see when the but Yannick corporate do you have to see and you see platform interactive
yeah, that can't happen. That would mean. I mean, yeah, that would be an issue. Yeah. So I mean, it would be great to have ways to at least use what's external and licensed in a way that allows its use to avoid rebuilding stuff. I guess, yeah, if I could figure out a way to do that so that if you were internal, you could see them all simultaneously, that would be wonderful. Yeah, and then it's part of this process of trying to get them to release some of their stuff outside too. And it's even trickier when you throw Wikipedia into the mix because Wikipedia has a lot of great subsurface content as well. There's other stuff that doesn't belong in Wikipedia, like, I don't know, workflows and particular pieces of software, like button clicking, how do I do this, that, and the other. That's not really Wikipedia content. So there's, that's even more tricky than I we need to figure out that. Basically, right now we are definitely replicating stuff.
But more remark on the issue. The data also is now looking into Unix implementation, so it will be an important next step of the number of days. In this case, I think the goal was to have predefined units, mainly. So instead of having arbitrary conversion methods, we just populate the base of all known physical units that we can then select available by default. Then you also get a lot of technical or scientific data from this data that have at the moment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we do a few things that try to, separate out things like length from distance, say, just because they're on different scales and it gets a bit weird if you're looking at small things and miles coming up. Right, so, and that's a bit clunky because it doesn't work. But like I say, people really explain things to the life, but one of them don't know. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Cheers.
We've got one more morning. So we'll pick up here.
Matt, is this yours?
No, that's fine.
Good.
We'll go ahead and get started then. So you guys, we're going to stand between you and lunch. So we hope this is a positive thing. Yeah. Right. Growling at
You guys
us.
start frowning.
Yeah.
We'll call it quits. Later.
Right.
Or we'll send you out.
Right.
Anyway, I'm Nancy Troutman, this is Chris Turner, and we work for Mercy Health Systems, which is the 6th largest Catholic hospital system in the United States. And we focus on these 4 states. Chris and I are in St. Louis, kind of our main area. And the hospital system has 42 different hospitals. The 32 are acute care hospitals, and then we've got children's hospitals, heart hospitals, orthopedic hospitals. It's a big organization with some outreach in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And within our 4 states plus, we have 40,000 coworkers, employees, coworkers, and about 2,100 physicians in the hospitals and 700 clinics or doctor's offices. So it's a big organization, and Chris and I are happy to be working there. Chris has been there about 2 years. I've been there just over a year. And we are not computer scientists, either one of us. We're novices to some degree. Chris has a communication degree. I have an education degree. So we sort of stumbled into this and done some on-the-job training, and now we support the wiki. So it's been interesting. We're part of the data management team, and data management is the stewards of the data assets. The team is responsible for some patient data, reporting, dashboards, metrics, provider information, location information, and then the wiki support that we do. So we work with new teams. Often somebody who's seen the work on the wiki will go to another team and say, oh, you guys maybe ought to look into that. And the person Nancy will go and do a WebEx meeting or an in-person meeting with them to kind of show them around. This is what we have. This is what we can do for you. What do you think? And often we get, oh, yeah, we'll get back to you. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they kind of fade away, or we might use groups later. But we do have a number of people who have said, yes, we want to play, and things are happening. So let me turn it over to Chris to kind of tell you how we got to where we are.
I get to give the history lesson. So this started, it's kind of funny, Wiki, when I worked in St. Louis University, which is a small nonprofit university in St. Louis, and it was small enough that I walk over to his office, I knew who they were. It wasn't very corporate, it was academic. And I go to Mercy, which is a little more corporate, not totally commercial nonprofit, but in the sense that it's structured, right? You know, vice presidents and C-level and this and that, it's all very kind of organized, in some cases even siloed, because we are regionally spread out across 4 states. So I have this thing I take care of over here, you take care of that thing over there, it's very separate. So it's interesting to us, being kind of new to the organization, that the wiki actually even got any sort of approval, or it still exists. It's amazing to us. So I want to go a little bit how it started. Basically what happened, the too long didn't read version of this, is it started small, proved useful, and just kind of grew from there. So it wasn't a top-down sort of like big, we didn't bring any sort of external consultants about knowledge management or knowledge creation. We didn't, have lots of architecture diagrams and structure. We kind of like, yeah, let's wiki. Okay, we'll go on a server and see what happens. That's kind of how this all started. And once again, just to reiterate what Nancy said, is I started out having no idea what I was doing. Right? The idea of a wiki was something I thought of as Wikipedia. That was kind of my own experience using it. As Nancy said, my background is in communication research theory, not IT. I worked in IT as a student, and I kind of learned all this stuff as part of the necessity of the job. In fact, when I first started out, one of the first things we had to do in one of our wikis, which we'll come to later, was take a whole bunch of data that was in an Access database and put it into the wiki content. Create wiki pages for each row, essentially. A bunch of metadata about these measures. And so I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I actually exported it to Excel, and this is really embarrassing to show you. I exported it to Excel, and then used Word's mail merge feature to generate like really clunky XML. Like export the page, I go, oh, that's XML specific. I'll just use mail merge to do that. And then like we took like 900 pages and stuck them all together. And, oh, that worked. Okay, now let's see if I have to import it. And it actually worked. And I had no idea. It was totally new. So the way that Wiki started at Mercy was it actually started with our call center, our IT call service center. So we have a whole bunch of people who work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week downstairs in the building we work in that support all the doctors and nurses and clinicians across the 4 states. So when you have a problem with our electronic health record, what we call Epic, and you need somebody right now to help you with that problem, because you probably have a patient in your room or something else going on. So they were big components of the wiki, and they started out basically being just for them. It was called the CSO PDF, the Customer Service Organization PDF. And it was basically a way for them to stop having to answer and figure out the answers to the same questions over and over. Right? If printers break in this applications and doing X, whatever the question might be, I've answered it 1,000 times. We work 24/7, so we might not even see the same people we have on the same shift. So how do we document on something? So we stood this up in a way when this is back in about 2008 or so, I think. And then our IT department said, hey, you know what? Let's start like formally tracking all of our applications. Let's figure out ways that people track the things that are on servers that we have licensing for, or that have support structures behind them, different teams supporting different applications and things like that. And so we built this thing called AIR. So we built this application called AIR, and this is an internal application written in, I think, in .NET or something like that. This will come up here. Okay, well, I'm not going to spend much time on this. Once again, you're obviously using lunch. So AIR was this great way of tying into some of our monitoring programs and some of our asset inventory systems, track things like the virtual machine name, the IP address, things like that. It was all kind of written in the web interface. But what happened is they started using that, but it didn't have much visibility. It didn't have a lot of human readable English sort of content around these different applications. Like, what's the purpose of this? Tell me more about the vendor. Tell me more about the history. What site was it installed on? Who's speaking? What's the architecture diagram? They said, okay, well, here's what we'll do. We'll pull all our stuff in air because it has tied all these asset management programs. Every time the application gets created in air, a new wiki page it automatically gets generated on the wiki and gets thrown out there so you can keep track of all those things. So that's how things kind of started to grow. Now our IT wiki has something like, has had since 2008, 35 million views, about 500,000 in the last year. They're averaging right now around 9,000 pages a month. Show a little hubris here. That's a pretty substantial amount considering it's only about 850 to 900 IT. So the audience is kind of set at a certain size, right? You're not having the whole population or the whole population of our organization. It's going to be IT people who are looking at it. That's pretty decent size. And then the next thing that happened is some of our data people, the folks that we work with, started thinking, we need to start tracking this. Well, I went too far. Gone too far. Okay. Some of our data people started looking at tracking things around our data assets. So things like, here's a location for this particular information around patients in this database. Here's some common SQL queries we use to determine cohorts of patients with diabetes, patients with congestive heart failure. Right? It's kind of that sort of query. You're going to run that kind of the same time, same way each time. That way you're not getting sort of different results back in one cohort. They said, well, the MTS wiki doesn't seem to be the right place to do it. It's not exactly IT, it's somewhat more business facing, interfacing with folks in different teams, whether it be human resources or finance. And they will actually be doing some of these queries themselves and working with my team. So we started a new wiki called the Information Portfolio, and that started, I want to say, in late 2010. And that was the same sort of thing, is that it kind of popped up on its own, we created the server, and we started putting content out there. And then people started hearing about it. People started hearing about this way to share information that wasn't email, it wasn't a Word document, and it wasn't SharePoint. And it was fairly easy to do, right? It wasn't a lot of hierarchy or bureaucracy to get a page created up. Listen. So we ended up having, and hopefully shows to you in a minute. We have folks from HR who store their process and procedures there. We have folks from quality and safety. We have folks from nurse staffing operations keeping track of education opportunities for nurses around their elements of managing nurse hours, how many hours they work. We also continue to grow it out to be kind of a place for our own, like I said before, to keep track of things like learning materials and other sort of front end systems. It has had about 100,000 pages in the last year, about 2,000 a month. Once again, so once again, 900 or so IT people. This is even a smaller subset of all of our everything this uses. So now I'm actually going to point over to Nancy, but I'm going to try to keep sort of working with our research about air. She's going to actually show you some of this stuff and walk you through how we're doing this.
Chris showed you how our NTS wiki, our technology wiki, started back in 2008. Plain looking page. Hopefully you can bring up what it looks like now, otherwise I've got to screen it up.
We're currently moving to my spare computer with new technology. No, it's my VPN client.
Oh.
Which, in all true technology fashion, when you're trying to present when somebody fails, and then you can get it. Alright, so we will not show you the live website. And instead we'll do shadow puppets for the entire thing. Ready? So,
So, as I mentioned, Chris showed you the 2008 version of the page. This is our home page now for our technology wiki. IT folks use. It's got a lot of kind of links up at the top to various chunks within the wiki, and then some kind of key stuff that's pulled out here and there. Then we're going to go to the next page, and it's a little crowded up here. Or nothing. Okay, so that's one of the pages within it. Our Service Center page, it's got the alphabetic tabs so that they can go through if somebody calls with an issue about a particular application, they can jump to that. There's a library that they can get to, again, with the alphabetical listing of all of these different applications. You go look at one of those, there it is, brings up a page, and this ties into AIR that Chris mentioned, the application piece. I know these are really tiny. One of the things I wanted to point out here, this little block is information that pulls directly from that AIR system. You can't edit that section on this page, but all the rest of this you can. And it's got a lot of the what this application is, what it does. Often there are data flow diagrams or links out to data models and so forth. And the other things that we've done is in quality, there is, you see the little two green dots there. One says that the information on the wiki page is complete. It's either a red, yellow, or green quality dot. And the other one says the data in the AIR application is complete. So if it's a new application that just got added, maybe they don't have all the information in there, that might be yellow or red. And then periodically, there's an exercise to say, get it. So that's a quick look from the technology side. And the next one is the information portfolio, which is the more business-facing wiki that we use. And this one is accessible to all 40,000 coworkers, but a very small subset is using it right now. The main page has a lot of links on the left-hand navigation that get you out to where some of our big contributors have done their thing. The first one I want to talk about is what we call our repository, where we track measures. So these are things that within the medical system we have to measure for government programs or award programs and so forth. And then the measures are, the results from those measures are recorded on dashboards, and we have dashboards described within the wiki. And then there's improvement issues that come up, and those are often reported in the clinical program catalog. And this section is maintained by our quality and service team, and they are a really big contributor to what we have here. So this kind of gives you everything at once. This initial page is the measure compendium, where we have these blocks or each programs of measures. So when you click on one of those, it opens a program page where we've got, this is form driven, we have an introduction, maybe some additional information. Some of the pages have data flow diagrams and so forth. The attribute box tells you what kind of program this is. This happens to be a payment-related program. It has 21 measures in it. It was last verified in May. So within this contributors, the quality and service team, they are pulling for us, and it's really great. They actually hired a woman who was within Mercy. She's a nurse, and they hired her into the quality and service team to make sure this is great. And she's done a fantastic job. We have about 800 measures out here, and Mary has touched most, if not all of those. And she went in a year ago and verified that this program that includes 21 measures, all the measures are well defined, and that's another quality piece that we've done on this wiki, where we have defined specific fields, and those have to be filled out in progress or moderately defined well. So she verified this a year ago, said we're in good shape. My guess is she'll go back in the next month or so and verify. This page links out to the 21 measures that are part of this program. You click on those, go to the next one, and it comes up with the measure page, which is also form-driven and has a similar look as the attribute box, which has the back box at the bottom. And it links out to a dashboard page. It tells you this measure is reported on a specific dashboard. You have to have access to get to the dashboard. If you click it and you're not authorized to see the dashboard, it'll give you an error message. But you can also click out to the documentation page. And again, form-driven, tells you about the dashboard, who your audience and frequency are, and at the bottom here, which unfortunately is cut off, it shows you all the measures that appear in this dashboard. And again, you can click those to go back to the measure page. The other thing is that we've connected out to the dashboard, and on each dashboard, we have a little eye somewhere, icon, that if an executive is looking at the dashboard and wants to know a little bit more, I'm looking at this trend line, but I don't quite understand what it is it's measuring, what is this PSI 03 about. They click that, it'll take them back to here, and they can read about it, click the measure, go back to there. So it kind of does a full circle between the measures and the dashboard. And then the third piece that I mentioned is our clinical program catalog. And it ties in as well. There are sometimes events occur in the hospital. Typically that means something bad happened. And a team will get pulled together in that hospital to do some research and figure out how do we make sure that doesn't happen again. In the past, the quality and safety folks had those situations and something happened, say in this hospital in Springfield, they figured things out, they did some research, and that was great. Now they know what they're doing and that all got put on the shelf. And nobody else really knew about it around the rest of the ministry. And 6 months or a year later, something very similar may have happened in one of the other hospitals, and they got a team together and spent a lot of time and energy, did a lot of research, and came up with a solution. And then somebody would say, didn't that happen back in Springfield? And then they would realize that they just had this redundant effort and spent a lot of time and energy and looked at all the same research and hopefully came to a very similar conclusion, but it was a lot of extra time. Now, when an event occurs, they kick off a team. The team documents everything out here in the clinical program catalog. So we've got different categories with tabs across the top there that they can segregate what the event was and what they're looking at, and then create a new version, and it comes up again. It's a similar look and feel with the attribute box. And this one ties back to, here's related measures in this patient safety improvement effort that they did. And this ties back to all the same measures, many of the same measures that we just looked at. So quality and safety has maintained all of that. They are huge contributors to us. Another one, Chris mentioned the human resources folks, so they have this homepage for them that shows a lot of different procedures. These are their internal procedures. I lose my badge and I have to go to the human resources folks and say, I need a new badge. Somebody can click it, open the procedure, follow that, so that it's a consistent process that they follow. The staffing operations Chris mentioned, the nursing. So they have this page that again has their procedures and some reporting, a very similar layout with the Ask Queries. They also do their education events. You can see, they've got a couple of upcoming events in June. They have WebEx reportings that they can get to from there as well. You click that, it shows up. There's the other more information about that, those courses. Another big contributor that we have that just kind of happened is our sustainability team. Just a few weeks ago, Chris and I became aware that there was a new sustainability manager in one of our other facilities, and suddenly pages were going out on the MTS rating. And we were looking at them and said, this is not really the right place. It's not technical information. So we got a hold of him, helped him move the pages from one wiki to the other, And they have gone to town. I mean, he's put 38 pages out there just in the last few weeks. And they're really dynamically using it. One of them is called Kathleen's Attic. I think Chris may tell you a little bit more about that later. It's kind of a fun page that they have out there. But this allows us to share the information between our different facilities. Somebody's figured out a great way to handle the recycling program. They can share that information and they can bring it to the rest of the administrators. A couple other, I'm going to skip through one here. So a couple other big pieces that we have is our learning series. So there's the Mercy Daydale Learning Series Library. And this is mostly links to a page that tells you a little bit about something you're trying to do, and most of them have a video embedded in the page. So you can watch a 2-minute to 10-minute video about how to do something. So that you open this up, this is the video embedded within the page to learn about ICD 1030. Another piece is one that Chris and I are a big part of is this Facets. It's a newsletter that we put out to our team of 40 or so people, the data management team, the data management newsletter. And we've been doing it about 9 months now. A number of other people have seen it and asked to subscribe, so the last one we sent out to about 90 people across the organization. But they're all out there. Put through, we've got some consistent stuff and some new articles, new topics every month. We link them at the top of each one when you open it. There's topic areas and audience areas, which is some things that we can use as semantic values to say, oh, these are all emerging technology articles that we have. We've become big contributors on that. We turn back over to Chris to talk about some of the growth, the numbers behind that, and our future plans.
Nobody's gnawing on their pencil. So, really quickly, I want to go over some growth. So we've been doing this, meeting with people and talking to them when they have needs to share information, to document information, systems, leveraging semantic forms, leveraging semantic media to document all that stuff. And I hope this is useful for you as in different organizations, whether it's healthcare, and I can give you examples of what sort of things you can do when you're looking at applying semantic media. It isn't just a page with some values and hit save. You can really kind of look into a robust content management system space. So the MTS Wiki, the internal one, this is some growth here I'm share with you all. I'm not trying to gloat or anything like that. But this goes back to about July 2010 here on the x-axis. And here we are about last month or so. The gray line at the top is the number of views we've had. The green line is the number of pages we've had created as we've grown. And this is page numbers are in thousands, views are in thousands, and users are in hundreds. So this purple line is how many users we had, and then the red line is the number of edits per month. And that fluctuates throughout the month and fluctuates over time. A side note here, I have to go back and check my numbers here, and my boss put these numbers together, so I'm going to place all the blame on him if he's wrong. But it's interesting to note here that this right here is when we introduced the update to our wiki. We updated from version 1.16. So for those who've been around for a while, that's the old version, to 1.23. So I think we're from Semantic Media Wiki 1.5 to 1.9 or whatever. And so one of the big things we did is we installed, we enabled Visual Editor. We were using FCK Editor, which was great back in the day, but it's terrible now because it plays a lot. It makes pages gibberish. And it doesn't work with some of the newer stuff that's out there. So that's the big spike is here when we introduced Visual Editor and some of the improvements in the number of edits. So it's kind of interesting to see. I don't know what to do in correlation and causation for different things, but it's interesting to see that those spikes show up like that. Because we have a better editor. We have something like over 1,000 edits already with Visual Editor. People just want that. They don't want to do it. The information portfolio, the information portfolio is just a smaller of the two wikis. This growth here, it's in the thousands as well. I think it's a little off though, it's pushing zeros there. But it's the same sort of growth. You can see that over time. This only goes back to about June of last year. The same sort of growth, steady kind of growth, nothing super drastic. It's just kind of every day. Somebody goes in and does something, yeah, new page, here.
more people find out about it, so we're communicating with them, more teams are using it as a substantial part of their workflow, and the growth kind of continues to go. The last one I'm going to show you is the measure compendium. So when we sat down with quality and safety and we said, okay, you've got this crazy access database and you want to put that into something more manageable, let's look at the wiki. One of the things that they were really concerned with is measuring the quality of those article pages as time progressed. Right? They knew they had something like, I think they had something like starting out around 500. You had something around 700 or so. That's the gray line at the top, the number of actual pages we had in this database. We pulled them all over. We needed kind of blank pages at that point. You know, like again, Mary, who's been a nurse for something like 30 years, we showed her how semantic forms work in these other groups. And she took her robust knowledge in healthcare and how these measures work and how the reporting programs interact with the government and other agencies and started documenting them. So we had 3 levels. We have basically 4 levels of quality. The best one is well-defined, that's the green line, and the worst one is need definition. And we measure each page if they had a semantic value, if they have a value for a semantic property in these 3 categories. One was it has a definition, it has a methodology, if it has improvement strategy, and if it has denominator. So it's 4 qualities. If a page has 1, it gets a point of 1. If a page has 2, it gets a point of 2, and so on and so forth. And you can see, as this is not my work at all, I can't compare this is all Mary's work. As you see, is when she got hired and over time, as she started editing those pages and saving them, and those values got saved out, we've actually flipped things to where we have almost all of our now well-defined measures, well-robust documentation that is trustworthy because we have these quality measures on the pages of category. People can look at them with total transparency, really run reports you can see what we have to start, show how things go. So it's fun because this is an example of what happens when you have people who are dedicated to helping people within your organization use semantic media and document things. On the flip side of that, we have Catherine's Attic, which I wish I could show you the whole page. This was something out of some folks in Oklahoma City. Nancy mentioned they found out about our IT wiki, and without asking anybody, they started creating pages out there, and they created one called Catherine's Attic. Catherine McCulley is the founder of Sisters in Music. And so they created this page, and basically it's like Craigslist for internal organization. I've got an extra entertainment center in my office space. Does anybody's department need it? If you filing cabinets, desks, chairs, lights, they started just taking pictures with their cell phone and uploading them to the wiki, the whole list of you, with contact information, a picture of the item. And the idea being as part of the sustainability efforts is these things don't sit there going to waste. So this page, in the short few months it's been, is like the 5th most popular page on the wiki. Because people are going to it every day, every other day. They're like, oh, I need this, I need that, before I do it, it's there. Going to picture up, and once again, using visual editor and upload wizards, we can throw a picture up there and be done with it. And they did this without us really kind of talking, kind of figuring it out, which talks so much, I think, to the strength of semantic community as a content, but also in people in the community. Another example of something we did is we had this need. We have this thing called ICD codes. They're basically going to diagnose how coding for billing to get paid. An injury or an ailment or something like that. So if you go in and you go in, you're in one of my favorite queries. This is the query here for Orca, the word Orca. Bitten by Orca is actually an ICD code. We live in St. Louis. We don't see a lot of these reports. But what's happening here is I'm using a complex kind of crazy stack, and semantic media would use the front end. We store these codes. There's 2 different kinds. We're going. Let me get back. Healthcare is going through a transition period right now where we have this one coding paradigm called ICD-9 that is kind of not well defined. Like if I went in because my arm is broken, I would code it as arm broken, right arm. And that's as detailed as it. But now we're going to ICD-10 codes where I can get super, super detailed in that coding, and that results in more accurate billing and more accurate things like that. So we have to do this crosswalk for our clinicians to know, okay, I used to do it this way, now how do I do it in the future? So what we did is we took millions of rows of ICD codes, sorted them in Hadoop, used Elasticsearch as a front end to give us a JSON feed for queries, used external data extension for semantic media to parse those queries, and the results came back to produce a table of that search in the format. So basically the wiki is a front end to Elasticsearch to the Hadoop data, Hadoop storage of all these rows of data. It's a crazy complex thing, but it was a need that we had, and we didn't have a lot of who is still fairly new, especially in healthcare. We have a lot of folks who like build front ends, and I'm like, well, if you give me a feed or something, I can do that. We're using external data to JSON parse it and create this nice widget. So I search for whatever I'm looking for, and anywhere where worker shows up, it gives me the old diagnosis code and the new one. It tells me there's a match between them exactly. I can search that table and find this match, and find this table together. That's that old code. I'll try to go through the rest of this really quick here, and then we all wait for lunch. This slide is influenced by Lena's talk Wednesday, sorry. So a lot of people ask, I've heard lots of conversations about how do we have growth. It's less about the technology, it's more about the people, more about the culture. So basically it's about nurturing things. It's like a garden, right? Understand who your subject matter experts are. They are your customer. They're the ones who have the knowledge. Those are the ones you have to work with on making it easy for them to use. You might think WikiText is great and awesome and you love the markup, but they don't. And so get over that. Sorry, suck it up. You're not going to convince them that WikiText is the greatest thing. To that end, though, I will admit Mary Burton, employee from quality safety, is the best expert now. Also, treat it as your product, right? This is your product. I don't sell this. I'm not going to the healthcare system saying Wiki's great, check it out. But I do internally. I treat it as though it's my product, and I want to provide the best product to people, not just say, hey, here's Wiki, good luck. Same thing we said any other way of managing information, SharePoint, Google, WordPress, you name it. It's all about selling the product means part of the product you offer. Also, be comfortable with things failing a lot. As Nancy mentioned, we have a list of all the people who we've talked to in the past, and I would say probably anywhere from 50 to 60% of that list are people who do not go anywhere with stuff. We mock something up in a form, we filled it up like 5 pages, we sat down with them, we showed them how it works, we showed them how easy it would be to update stuff, and they said, great. Either you're going to be ahead of the curve, they're not ready for that yet, they're old school mentality, old school way of thinking, you're ready for it. Come back around, usually just give them enough time. Or in some cases, you've got to find the right person in that team. You know HR needs to store that information, and this is way better than the way they've been doing it. And they know that maybe the person you're talking to isn't a decision maker, isn't a person who can convince other people in the organization that they need to do that. You got to find those people and talk to them and be comfortable with that failing. Lastly, we also do monthly cleanup. We have some template tags we use, and we tell everybody there's 3 template tags. One is marking your pages as drafts. Let us know that it's true. Something you're working on. Little banners if you're talking to that template. We also have 2 that are pretty new and pretty cool. One is mark for deletion. You think this page is deleted, this page is not using anymore, you no longer have that system in the organization, that program is no longer being used. I goofed up and I don't use the page. Mark it and we'll delete it. Once a month we go through, check out those categories, that template added to your category, check that category, and take some action on it. And the third one is a mark for cleanup. You say, this page is about Outlook and it tells me all about this thing, but for Outlook 2003, I really want to know more about this, but I'm not the subject matter expert. Well, we'll find out today. We'll look at the revision history, we work in the IT department, we'll go out and find that person, hunt them down, and give them a hard time and say, hey, this page is out here. Do you need this anymore? Are you going to update it? Because people are coming to us now and bugging us about it. Please go update it. And that kind of reinforces the whole, oh, I have that out there. I forgot we had that out there. I was hired 2 weeks ago. I didn't know. So that kind of, once again, treating it as a garden, pruning it, and helping those folks. One last thing, I'm sorry. Also, don't use the word author or owner. A lot of times it's hard to do, especially if you come from more traditional content management systems like SharePoint. Use words like contributor. Right? Use primary contributor, secondary contributor. Contributor denotes something that isn't mine, it's all of ours, I just helped out with it. So that language is really important too. You're interacting with people. One, to set clear expectations. This is not your wiki page or your set of wiki pages. It's everybody's. Be comfortable with that because you are a contributor and you're not going to own it. And I have some stats here, but those ones seem more boring stats. For the future, we are a very interesting shop. We have Semantic Media Wiki. We also have SharePoint, and we're upgrading to 2013. And we have Drupal. We use it as our kind of internal-facing, high-level marketing communications portal. By use, I mean it supports as your homepage, but nobody actually uses it. We just upgraded it. What's that? Yeah, right. We also have Epic, which is a giant repository of information. There's potential in the future to figure out ways of integrating the knowledge we're documenting in things like our wikis into those sort of clinical-facing programs. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at things like Hadoop, which is giant volumes of data, and how we present them in different ways that allow humans to get the information out of it more succinctly. The last thing I want to say is, and I wish Yaron was here because I want to pick on him a little bit. The biggest thing that's been a big boom for us is visual editors. We have lots of editors, people who are not IT people, they're not technology people, but they are content experts. And this is a great thing for them because they can just go in and start typing. They expect this in 2014. They don't expect to learn new markup or new syntax. To a lot of people, it's no different than asking them to learn HTML to do their job. And so I know this kind of goes against the grain for certain people who use Wikipedia or Wiki in the past. But strongly encourage you to look at visual editor, and I can't wait for that to get incorporated into things like semantic form editing. Way over time. I know we're all probably very hungry. I wish I could show you some of this. I can maybe if once I'm probably as soon as I sit down, if I detail work again. But after this, we can show pages and straight out some of the things to work. But we use it very greatly inside of Mercy, and appreciate your time. Oh yes, if you have questions, go ahead. Yeah.
To implement an human organization is always difficult, but in healthcare it's really worse sometimes because people are already have a little bit support. So they are running support time. How do you manage to bring healthcare professionals to the
So that's funny. You know, when, our team works closely with quality and safety, who are folks who make sure that we're not killing people. And so that team was working with us with some database stuff, and they happened to mention their need, document this and share it. And so we said, we have a solution for it, and we can show you how it works. So we sat down and mocked it up and we showed it to them. And they said, that's exactly what we need, web-based. Anybody in the organization can get to it. That's amazing. It's easy to update. Wow, that form is really slick. It's easy to be able to save. That's pretty impressive. Great, we'll go on that. We just didn't mention that anybody can also edit it, and that the revision history is entirely public, and there's no sort of governance of who can or can't see that information, or edit that information. So we avoided the whole dialogue. The response to that was, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I don't know if I like that sort of thing. And the answer was basically, well, instead of designing something for the edge cases, but for the worst case scenarios, we're designing something for the best case scenarios. That is, we're all good people, we're all here to contribute positive things. You have to log in to edit things so they're going to know who you are. And they were comfortable with that. It took a little while. They ended up being comfortable. They understood the value of doing it. Value outweighed the risks.
if you have mercy also, like unitary people with safety and quality, but not
Yeah.
to get these people because you are alive. Clinical cost.
Right. The clinical is definitely more difficult, especially because they're already tasked with so many systems to deal with that's separate from actually dealing with the patient. Right? They already have to go through Epic and touching everything with their vitals or weight or height. You know, what's going on, what medications are they on, what allergies do they have. To add another system to that is a challenge. Right? And that's something, the metric compendium will probably be the closest thing we'll get right now to bridging that, because it's still fairly administrative. The idea being is if you're, say, a nursing manager somewhere, you're getting a dashboard or a report that tells you how well or how bad you're doing. The idea being is we can link them into all the documentation to help improve that. But they're still going to have to go to the actual nurses on the floor with the document and say, hey, please stop doing that thing you're doing. Do it this way now. Here's the document. Right? That's probably about as close as we're going to get to actual clinical information.
I would like to know on your services, more of the services that you analyze behavior, and then ingest or automatically analyze the results. So the connection between model and
Sure. So right now our usage of Hadoop is basically just a place to store the data in a system that's fast enough for us to do query with. So the external data extension allows us to basically pull that data in very quickly. Because it's Hadoop instead of a traditional MySQL database or something like that on a server, it takes a few seconds to do versus many minutes. That's the only leverage we have, is just to extract it. So we basically created these giant tables in Hadoop, stored it there, and we're using Elasticsearch as a front end. Elasticsearch will just give us a JSON feed from Hadoop. It's kind of multi-tiered, just a straight pull in. It doesn't get saved. These queries don't get saved immediately. They just get run basically at the front end. You do a defensive front end that produces results. You leave the page, they're gone, you have to go back and do that search. Okay. Yes, so that's a big thing. It's interesting because the MTS wiki is older and uses less properties. Basically, a few attributes that come from error in some categories. That's about it. The rest of it is a giant text field that a template gets loaded in, first page, first boilerplate gets loaded in, and the page is loaded in. So visual editor works great there because all the human readable content is just human readable content to edit and go to path. On the information portfolio, that is much more structured. In fact, I'd say I'm probably just using semantic forms because each area you saw was paragraphs of text with descriptions, numerator, denominator, improvement strategies. Where Mary's going in, these are all semantic, all fields in semantic forms. So it gets the wiki text editor. And so, or the wiki editor. We can see wiki text. So it's an interesting sort of environment. The IT people are using visual editor because they had it and they used it. Whereas working with Mary and quality safety and other folks in the information portfolio, I've never seen that. They never had that experience before. They like the more form-driven stuff. It's kind of the economy of it. If you're using kind of forms, everything works great. But as soon as you try editing one of those pages with visual editor, everything's in a template, so no, you can't do it.
Yes, it's sort of like an idle.
Right now. Exactly. So we have to think about that when developing new content. Are the people we're dealing with going to be okay with some fields and forms and some wiki text like the bullet lists and things like that? Or are we just going to have to go less semantic values and make it just a looking text there?
So far, you guys have an input box that was put around
Yes. And there's even in just this month some improvements to the template systems in visual editor as well. So once again, suggesting possible values for fields and things like that. Pull back from template. The first dream I would have is that we would create, like we do with fields and forms and semantic forms and autocomplete on property X. I would love to have that in visual editor. So when I double click on that template, it only lets me pick what I can pick from the semantic values and save the page. That's beautifully what we do. So I hope that's what the next step is.
Can you tell us about money and what it comes from? Because you and the electric besides the quality.
Sure. So there's once again about 940,000 people in the organization across 4 states: doctors and nurses, clinicians, municipal folks, IT folks. About 900 IT folks. There's 40 people on our team. The data management team.
Yeah.
And the wiki team is Nancy.
You're looking at me.
We have the whole team. Right? Nothing's getting done back at home. But we have a lot of people who are invested in documentation efforts other places in the organization. Like we mentioned, Mary and quality and safety. We have key contacts in human resources, and we know who people are who are updating stuff in the wiki. So we talk to them from time to time. Especially when we do like big upgrades and things like that. We tell them, this is coming, we're going to change some things, don't freak out, open with new features. So we have lots of those sort of, I don't know what you call them, like super users or advanced users. And those folks usually take care of themselves. They usually, a new person comes into HR, who's responsible for updating HR documentation. They pretty much deal with themselves. The next thing we know, this new person as an editor, and they really want to help. And the two of us, jokingly, I'm totally joking here, not to back my boss, I got into this by accident. It wasn't what I was hired to do, and Nancy was lied to. So, Nancy was hired as a technical writer. She'd come in and she was told the job description was you're going to update user manuals and things like that, and that's not what you call.
Which is great. This is way better. Way better.
So I was hired as an enterprise architect and came in to help work around the domain of communication and collaboration. I need to go talk about that and work on more proof of concept stuff, and I ended up kind of over here on this team. So I kind of wanted to. I can do this.
We can at least technical people.
We are.
We're the technical department. Like we're having fun.
That's what makes it very good, because, you know, these concepts are really advanced technology today.
Okay, now everybody, he's the one holding this back.
Okay, so, very good.
Wow. I'm teasing you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Sorry. What is the schedule?
We messed up the full function way of the day.
Do you want to choose an hour and a half lunch, or we can skip the very last session?
So what's the time we start again? Can you say?
An hour and a half. That's
2:50 or 2:30?
2:30.
At 2:30.
Everybody get that? We will extend the lunch break until 30.
Fight for the better media we can. Come on. This is a democracy.
Okay, David, you're out there.